real quick. We investigated ourselves and found out we did not. You guys like to refresh your teeth? Started because we're just on the intro screen now, and we're gonna be doing the thing. Run up it. Yeah, sure, I can help you with that. This intro because it. Shout out, folks, if you're watching. We're just gonna get started in a couple of minutes here. What's up? Good evening, everybody. This is Podcast with the Pirates, episode number 3. And we are here tonight with special guests. We got Pinpoint in the house, and we got Unknown Artists in the house. And we're super excited to have this discussion here. We got a lot to talk about tonight, so we're going to get into it. But before we get started, I just want to remind everybody we got some links in the description. We got the merch store. You can get some pirate merch, and we got some new pirate merch coming out right away here, and it's awesome. We're gonna be dropping some information on that really soon. We also have a link tree. You can check out some of the music I've been releasing there, and there's also a crowdfunding link in the description, so you can see that we're going to be crowdfunding our next pirate party. So check that out if you want to support the pirates and get this happening. I want to introduce our special guests. So today we have Pinpoint and Unknown Artist. Tell us a little bit about yourselves, gentlemen.
I get to go first. Well, so yeah, no, I go by the artist name Pinpoint, PINPOIN7. I've been kind of getting into the electronic music side of things quite heavily, probably over the last couple of years, but really kind of taken things on more on the DJ end over the last 6 months or so. Yeah, I've been always interested in doing music. Got into Impulse Tracker back in the late '90s. A number of years after that, I decided to spend a full year learning to play violin, and then at a certain point, I decided to say, "Fuck it, I'm gonna make 2022 my year of music," and bought my first synthesizer in January of that year, and really took a nosedive to try and understand a bit of music theory. But outside of that, I run Half Hitch Brewing Company out in Cochrane, and
Oh my, I'm sorry.
oh my. And yeah, I've been living in Cochrane for probably about the last 17 years, and and running the brewery for, I guess, we had the started brewing in summer 2016. So that's been kind of my life for a good portion of it.
Perfect. My DJ name is Unknown Artist. I started DJing, or rather, I picked it up as my COVID activity. Actually, I started working on it in 2020. Although I did arrive to it with a bit of a musical education from before that. I'm classically and jazz trained across 4 instruments. Currently learning a fifth. I decided I wanted to learn trumpet recently. I've been working at it for now a few years here, working in the local scene, getting to know everybody, and trying to create no name for myself as an unknown artist.
Or a movement.
Or a movement. Who knows? Who knows? We are all unknown artists at one point.
Very true. And it's actually when I met you, I was kind of grilling you. I'm like, I need you to give me some more information. But you're like, no, I want to kind of be, a little bit more unknown. And I find that really cool. You consistently surprise us with what you do. Every time we talk, every time we interact, every time you play our stages or whatever, you're always doing something different, and it's really cool to see that. I really respect and appreciate that.
Yeah.
You're not one dimensional. I mean, nobody really is, but a lot of people get behind a certain idea or a certain brand or what have you, and you don't really see anything else about them until you really start to get to know them. But as an artist, you kind of pick and choose what you let people get to know about you, essentially, So
Mhm.
Yeah.
it's kind of neat to see that unfold. I know that you did some pretty cool stuff for us there with the jungle jazz that you
Yeah.
came out with there at one of the last pirate parties. You surprised me. I'm like, okay, some jungle jazz. Okay, we'll put that on the schedule there. And I come up and I see you, and you're playing some saxophone up on stage there live while you're doing the thing. So I think that's really fantastic.
Yeah,
And,
those two genres were like a fun couple to create because, like, drum and bass has been around for quite a long time, but it's only really moved into Western Canada seriously over maybe last decade or so.
yeah, for sure.
And drum and bass is like, it's a really interesting genre because the whole thing is actually built around like a 2-second loop that was originally sampled from a jazz song in the 50s. So like when you start to look at the way that the beat structures are put together and some of the like syncopated rhythms and all that kind of stuff, they actually boil down to be like very close cousins. It's just some like jazz obviously adding a lot more chord progression elements and stuff like that. But
You're talking about the amen break,
yeah,
if I'm
that's
correct.
the
Yeah,
amen.
exactly.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah.
this is the whole discussion of like jungle's king, and drum and bass is actually a subgenre of jungle, right? So it all started from like sampling the amen break,
Yep.
and it's just kind of become this crazy thing
Yeah.
for sure.
Before bass was bass.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Some of that old school jungle is a little off-putting, at first
It can
to
be
some
it
people.
can be
Like
quite a
even to
lot.
me, when I was early in the scene, it was a lot of dubstep and stuff. I was like, oh, if it's not dubstep, and I don't want it, basically. But I was ignorant. Obviously I've expanded my horizons a lot. But when I heard jungle, like old school jungle, the first time, I'm like, what the hell is this pots and pans? You know what I mean?
It's
Like,
just a guy with a kit.
but until you start to kind of get into it and you understand the history and the flow and just everything about it, now I'm a jungle fan. Like I fucking love it.
Yep. Yeah, I can't get enough. That's for sure. Love me some chopped snares.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about, as artists, what inspire you guys to create music. Because I know, Chris, like you do a lot of stuff with analog synths and modular synths and stuff. So like, and like I was talking about, you do the live instruments and all this stuff. What inspires you guys? What really makes you drive towards this goal?
Well, I mean, even the synthesizer side of things is for me is relatively new. Like, I said earlier, I spent a year learning to play violin. It wasn't until maybe the last year or so that I finally eventually sold my violin to put towards another synthesizer. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm wanting to pull out of continuing to go forward in that realm, because I think where I sit right now is I'm still kind of very much continually learning and evolving how I want to approach certain things. And I think where I kind of look at where I want to be as an artist, it's like, yeah, I play a lot of techno and stuff, but drilling down, I'm playing a lot of melodic techno, and I love melodic drum and bass. I love melodic dubs, like anything melodic that you can build emotion and stuff around is stuff that I really like. Which you can play that into soundscapes. And even when I started working with these gals that would do sound like meditative sound baths, and they gave me the opportunity to bring electronics into it, and I brought my Arturia Polybrutes for the first while working with them, and so they'll have the crystal singing bowls and the Tibetan gongs and some percussions, and I would come in with my synthesizer, and then I would have like very ambient melodic type of stuff that I would do with it, to the point where now if I go to like an open mic, or I think even went out to Anthony Appleby's with Oscillate for their beat convergence there a couple weeks ago, where I brought that same instrument. And when we got an opportunity to solo, I would still always use that one kind of melodic ambient piece that I would do, on the basis that I would, when I did it at the open mic, I just told them, okay, I just want you to close your eyes and sit back and listen, partly because everyone else was doing like rock covers and stuff with guitars and singing before that, and I'm coming in with something completely different.
Completely different. Yeah, for
Absolutely
sure.
completely different. But the great thing about it is like, well, it was a fully coherent piece and had its purpose. It was creating that soundscape, and then kind of bringing back things with a grounding to it, to a point where one person at the end said, "Oh yeah, no, I almost fell asleep by the end of it." I'm like, "Hell yeah, that's exactly what I was shooting for." Another person said, "Oh, when I opened my eyes, I felt like I was high or something." So it's like and so I think that can kind of almost go back to the core of the question as to kind of what drives me to continue doing this. Is there something about sound and music that is just an absolutely beautiful thing, beyond just simply, you know, creating weird things or cool things, or however you want to do it. It's almost an innate expression of emotion and desire, and kind of how a writer will kind of put themselves out on paper. We kind of do the same with music, and I kind of love that. And I love that when I do a lot of stuff in studio, I don't always hit the record button. I rarely hit the record button, because it's just me just interacting and just playing and enjoying the whole process and what I'm doing, and creating those sounds and just being a part of it, essentially. And that's the part of things that I really love about it, is sound, vibration, emotion, all comes together without having to see anything.
Frequency really is everything. Like, frequency that people say may have built the pyramids, for example, and like, start really getting in tune kind of with meditation, and stuff like that. They use the om and all this other stuff, right? It's all different frequencies, like, and frequencies are essentially what drives us. Everything else is kind of, in a theoretical aspect, possibly a simulation or an illusion, as science tends to say. But in my opinion, like, frequency builds everything, it holds everything together, and that's just kind of the glue of the fabric of reality, if you.
Well, it's beauty when we work in in the world that we do. Like, when we're talking acoustic frequency, it's stuff we feel, and when we can feel it, that's when it can start affecting you, really to your core, like very intrinsically. I guess that's why we love having stuff like that, those big subwoofers, and
Yeah, for sure.
really have fun with that type of stuff. To you're going to feel this to your core, and we want you to.
Before we get into your inspirations, I just want to touch on as well. Like, I kind of feel like this whole thing with the frequency is, the fight between good and evil in a lot of ways. What I've learned, being in the industry for so many years, like, people don't want to have big rave shows. People don't want to have these, there's always people complaining. Permits are hard to get. Cities don't want to play ball. Like, Edmonton has an after hours. We kind of talked about this in the last podcast. We don't here. It's always this like, stop. You can't do this, trying to shut it down, and it's overreaching and controlling for some reason. But what is that reason? Is it simply just government overreach, or is it something more bigger? You know what I mean? Like I said, it's a fight of good and evil, in my opinion, literally on a spiritual level almost. And frequency scares the evil. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the approach you want to take. 'Cause I can go a little more from a pragmatic perspective, just because even within the town of Cochrane, I've tried to kind of embed myself a little more in the political end of things, and even within that, like, you can have laws or bylaws that'll come into place, but when you have people that change over, the original intent of those bylaws and stuff can get lost. So it ends up becoming more about who you end up working with within those municipalities. I know within Edmonton, I'm not sure what all they have for bylaws up there. But if there's people that are within the administration that are more amenable to being able to work with the concept of an after hours, then you just need the will and somebody willing to work with them. It's kind of what I'm trying to do in Cochrane. Like we're planning on doing a New Year's Eve rave, and the we're fully intending to go after hours, and the venue's open to going after hours, and reached out to bylaw, and they're open to it as long as the exterior noise isn't creating any issues. So yeah, I think it can be doable. I tried looking into some of the bylaws within Calgary, and I think it'd just be a matter of talking to the right people, and not just talking to the right people, having the right person that understands the legal framework. And not even just the community, like, you know, it's like, I understand the community, but I also understand how to talk with people within government administration and stuff, and you know, and I've spent years trying to develop that political capital, so that that when I come in and I say, hey, this is something that we want to try and do, they're not immediately saying fuck off. You know, it's like if I'm coming in and saying this is what I want to try and do, they know that there's a certain level of trust in that I'm going to do this, and I know I'm not going to do it in a way that's going to fuck shit up. You know, so if there's somebody coming forth that doesn't quite have that history, then there's that kind of risk factor from their perspective on it. So you have to kind of try and figure out how to alleviate that risk factor, because that's where their heads are going to be at usually. And if you've got a record of success or a record of working well with them, even if it's in a completely different industry, then they might be a little more amenable to it, especially if you've kind of developed some good relationships with some of those people within government administration.
Okay.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's like almost like engaging in the broader community allows you to bring the other community closer.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense to me. Is it my turn now? Or
yes, it is. Unknown artist. Let's
Like
talk a little bit about your
talk all
inspirations
night,
and stuff. No, it's good. This is great.
No, that's what we like on a talk show.
Yeah.
So, like, in terms of inspiration, I guess, or like what drives me to create music, or like realistically the experiences that Unknown Artist provides to its listeners, I would say that like one of my biggest drives is also the journey, but it's maybe a little bit different from what you were saying, Chris. So, because on my end, you know, I've had a lot of exposure to different kinds of music through my life, both through my education as well as, you know, just being open to all sorts of different stuff. I still don't really like country, but some people do. And, you know, through those experiences, I realized that, you know, most people aren't exposed to a lot of really good music. And every genre has good music. It doesn't matter what it is. Maybe you don't like it. Maybe it's not for you. But like every genre has well produced, well thought out, fantastic music in it.
I agree 100% with that. You just have to find the gems.
Yeah. And with that in mind, you know, as Unknown Artist and part of my branding, I decided that I really wanted to always mix it up. I never wanted to be playing the same songs. I never wanted to like consistently play the same genres. I wanted to every time go out and create a brand new experience where if someone hadn't seen, or like if someone had seen Unknown Artist before, they might even be confused, or like, you know, they might talk to their friends and say, oh, Unknown Artist is playing. He's going to play, you know, I don't know, hard groove techno, right? Yeah. And it's like I turn up and I'm playing D&B and I'm playing saxophone on the other side, right? So it's like this repeating, although every time different, change, where it means that, you know, people who maybe had seen Unknown Artists because and had like one genre, they roll up thinking they're going to get one thing, and it's not that thing. So it's like a bit of a journey into new experiences. And I also like to build my DJ sets in the same way, where it's, you know, you start somewhere where people are comfortable. You start with what they know. People love that. And then as you move into it, you can add more flavors. You can add more sounds. You can change the overall feeling of it. You can switch genres. You can add instruments. There's all these things that allow you to carry the listener from where they are comfortable into a new experience that they wouldn't have expected that they might have liked if they had control of the playlist. So on my end of things, I really like expanding people's horizons. I really like introducing people to new ideas and new sounds. And I think one of the most fun things about the way that unknown artists always chooses different genres is that there's always something new. There's always something new to look at. There's always new genres coming out, and that acceptance of, okay, you know what, I'm going to flow with the industry. Also, if I'm lucky, puts me right on the front edge of the global music consciousness, as I like to call it. Because, as a society, we're all sort of moving in the same direction. And I feel like some people are a little more dialed into where that direction is going. And I don't know what goes into that. I wish I had answers towards that. But, if you ride that wave, it's a cool place to be.
I like that wave analogy. That's cool. And yeah, every time the Pirates have booked you, you've done something different, and it's been super cool to see. Just it's consistently surprising, like I had mentioned. You never know what you're gonna get. I think that's really cool how you've kind of branded yourself as the whole unknown. You really don't know. Like it's always a kind of exciting drop.
Yep.
I don't really recall ever seeing someone doing that before. It's quite unique, and I respect that.
So nice. He kills it every time too.
Yeah.
Superstore does it too with their
honestly.
no-name brand beer and their no-name brand
What
chair.
the hell
That's
is that? They're stepping on my
Superstore's
market
doing it
here.
too.
What the
The no brand. It can be whatever you want.
So let's talk about how you guys deal with creative blocks. What happens, like, you're writing a tune and you almost got it, but, you're not quite there and you need something, but you can't. Like, I've been there myself, you spend 3 or 4 days mashing out one part of a tune, or you're trying to just get something just right or move on to the next step, or even trying a few different tunes, and maybe it's like a wider block on a macro and you just can't get that flow going. How do you guys get through that?
Well, you go for it.
That's an interesting one, because I feel like there's a lot of ways that you can preempt that feeling. And a lot of it comes down to the structure of your templates and like what you wanted the song to sound like in the first place, or maybe what you had in your mind. So, I guess let me expand on that a little bit. So, like when I'm producing music, I start in tiny chunks. It's like you come up with like sort of the basic groove, and then you change it and innovate it and move it all around and add phrasing, and you create like a journey with it. And it's like you start to feel like a little bit of writer's block. Well, if you sort of moved along in chunks all the way, so like my favorite thing is I'll come up with a drum beat, right? I'll go out and find like a sample off Splice, and I'll hack it up for the different sounds, come up with the basic groove, and then I duplicate that through the song. So like after I finish doing that, then I work on the next section. It's always starting with a simple idea. You find a simple thing that fits, and then you expand on it. And then it's like any moment where I start to feel like I don't know where I'm going, then I always have some element to jump back to make it more complex. And when I jump back into making it more complex, or like, like with drums, like I'm saying, like I love phrasing out the drum. So, everybody knows the basic amen break, but when you're listening to drum and bass, or the derivative of jungle, you find that if you're listening to like old school jungle, where it's actually a guy playing it, the aim and break will remain consistent, but it gets shifted around and it gets played with, and the drummer or like creates a sense where it's like you expect the beat, and then he maybe gives it to you a little early, maybe makes you wait for it,
Trolls you a little bit, yeah.
Exactly. And so I like to build like a structure out of it, where I start simple and add elements as long as I'm feeling inspired. And then the instant I stop feeling inspired, I go back and start doing phrasing. And then once you do phrasing, from there, it means that all of the other elements need to shift and adjust so that there's an interplay, there's a conversation between all the different instruments and sounds and whatever else you got in there. And so by adding complexity and rephrasing, and then adding complexity and then rephrasing, you're able to continuously give yourself a little push in another direction to change the next thing a little bit, and then change the next thing a little bit.
What about yourself, Chris?
Honestly, I don't have a good answer to really, because I end up in that place where a lot of producers wind up, is to start slowly building up a collection of unfinished tracks, and I'm certainly starting to get there. I think the last time I was actually able to put in like a solid, dedicated, focused day on just working on a track was probably Christmas Day last year. when I told everybody to fuck off and decided to have Christmas all to myself, home alone. And just that was my whole purpose in life that day. It was to focus on that. But that's if you're gauging it as a creative block on that particular piece, because in some respects, I don't necessarily believe that I run into creative blocks. I might just run into a block on how I want to continue that particular piece, or how I might want to build out the composition of a break in this particular piece or transition from that. But like within studio, I'll frequently just play with my synthesizers, try some different ideas, try different sound design exercises. I like when you brought up templates, because I know that's something I still need to put considerable time into, but because like it's still relatively new to me, given all of the other things that I also seem to do as well outside of music, is trying to find the time to, go through like Massive, or find all these presets that I like, or go through Splice and find some of my favorite presets that I want to have in whether Massive or Serum, or like I've got the Virus TI2 synthesizer. That synthesizer's got over 2,000 presets built into it. And it took me a weekend just to go through a few banks and take some
down arrow,
notes.
down arrow, down arrow, down arrow,
Exactly.
down arrow, down arrow.
Yeah, so I mean, there's still that aspect where I need to kind of find the things that I like as my go-to, but I'm still kind of in that exploratory stage. The track that I started working on Christmas last year was very much a trance style track, almost your kind of classic progressive style trance. But a lot of the stuff that I'm wanting to try and make more falls into that melodic techno, because that's the stuff that I'm spinning a lot of. Between Christmas and New Year's, I came up with a few orchestrated riffs that could potentially go into a movie if I wanted to, and had absolutely nothing to do with electronic music. So that's maybe that's the ADHD and me saying I still want to try all these different things, and maybe that's kind of the whole I want to have my cake and eat it too type of things. But maybe that's fine for where I'm at right now.
Pretty cool. I'm actually just going to write down here for one of the future podcasts. We can even talk about it now a little bit, but interesting to discuss about how, a lot of artists in the industry are ADHD and ADD.
Yeah.
Like
Noises
pretty much
and
everybody's
noises and
neurodivergent.
lights. Oh my!
I know these aren't blinking enough. What the hell?
It's pretty interesting. The way I deal with creative blocks anyway, to keep on track here, like I have a microcord here. You see, I know you're into analog synths, whatever. I play with it analog a little bit sometimes or whatever. But you were mentioning you have to write down like a bunch of yeah, it gets complicated sometimes. You find some cool stuff and you're like, oh, how do I get back there or whatever, right? But
It's worse if I tell you about my Moog Matriarch, because you can't even save presets into that thing.
Oh no!
It's like if you want to save a preset, you got to have like your. I think Moog actually has like a template diagram of the synthesizer, and you have to like mark what, especially if you're, because it's a semi-modular. If you have anything patched into it, you got to like draw what you've got patched into what, put lines where the dials are and stuff.
Making your own little wiring diagram.
Basically, and that becomes your paper preset. And then
Crazy.
I did the same thing. I had like an ambient patch that I had done on my Eurorack modular, and I took a handful of pictures and then created a document on how I wired everything together and why I wired it that way and stuff. So it's, if you're talking blocks to creativity, that can certainly be a block right there. But that's where I almost look at with Eurorack, is it becomes like a very exploratory type of thing, and you start to get kind of good at coming up with how you envision a sound to work and how you want to perform it. And then it becomes a little easier, but at the same time, I like sitting in front of it and saying, ooh, what if I patch this into this? What can I do with that? Ooh, what if I took this feedback and rooted it? And it just becomes a fun exercise. I can go all day on synthesizers.
For sure. It seems super complicated to me with the modular stuff, but back to the microcord here. One of the things that I've used in the past as that was actually key to making one of my favorite songs that I've ever produced. I flipped the keyboard around, upside down, and started fucking with it. While I was making, I had a creative block. I'm like, I'm gonna try something weird, try something different, right? And just playing it upside down gave me a different, obviously, perspective from the keyboard. And started playing stuff. I'm like, okay, whatever, and it ended up working out pretty good. I made a song through that. Another thing I have is Machine, so Native Instruments, obviously, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the cool technologies that Native Instruments has as well later. But the Machine is kind of cool because it's not set out like this, as are any of the pads, right? They're more like a honeycomb kind of when you start dealing with keys and whatever else and chord progression. So I find just kind of playing around with that is really fun, because Machine, you can also edit like what key you're in. Now, see, I don't know a lot of theory to exactly explain all this stuff, but there's like C sharp minor 7 or whatever, all that kind of stuff, right?
It's got all the scales built in, so you
Scales,
can
that we call them. Okay, so, yeah, and there's some that are really complex and
like the
hardly
Ableton
used or
push,
whatever. But
for instance.
yeah, similar idea.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting having that different perspective with that. And I also have this thing called on the camera here quick. Here, it's called a chord bot. It's a pretty neat little instrument. I don't know if I really want to call it an instrument necessarily, but you guys can see here, it's got all these keys here. These are all your scales right here, so you can really get into a whole bunch of different chord progressions and stuff. The guy's making them in his garage. It's not a plug for chord bot by any means or whatever, but when I do get stuck, sometimes I'll just start playing with that, because it gives you some really different sounds, right? Some interesting stuff. And then within my VST synths, I'll end up going to, maybe moving the sense or the I can't remember the word off the top of my head now. Not frequency, but your pitch or your sense, you know what I mean, down a little bit, just to kind of give it a little bit of offness, you know what I mean? And sometimes that'll be like, ooh, and it sparks something, and then you're like, okay, let's dig into this a little bit more and kind of explore that type of stuff. So I kind of just like experimenting when I'm stuck and trying weird stuff, essentially, to try to get moving past the blocks myself.
Yeah, okay.
So what are your most memorable moments from your career in the last year or so? Big events, big wins, successes, funny moments, or any big lessons that you've learned?
I don't know if you want to go first.
Have you thought of something?
Well, I mean,
Okay. Big successes this year. Did a live performance with a hip hop project that I was working on. That was pretty fun. We did that out in Cochrane at the beginning of November. That was a fun experience. That was my first stage performance, multi-person DJ and instrumental back and forth kind of feeling. So that was a pretty good achievement. It was fun to get that project under the bill, especially because with that particular project, like other than the drums, my partner and I, we played all the instruments. So between bass, guitar, saxophones, flutes, we played it all. So it was a really fun experience to get to play all originals and get to do it on stage in front of a crowd. That was a good feeling. I would say maybe some of my biggest lessons this year, I think I need to accept that I can't do everything live. I think I might need to do a little bit more preparation. I think some people who have seen me perform will notice that sometimes I make some mistakes because I'm trying to do too much all at the same time. And I think that that's probably a lesson I'm going to have to figure out how it applies to me directly. Or not directly, but like how it applies in action.
say for me, I'm still kind of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed here. Over the last couple of years, it's honestly just been rolling with a whole bunch of firsts, really. I remember when I started going down this pathway of music production, I've wanted to get into DJing for a while, but I've recognized that if you want to do well as a DJ, you need to be able to produce your own music first,
100%.
which also happens to be the harder part of things. So I figure, why not do the hard part first, which I'm still learning. But I also found that, I had some cool opportunities, and I remember sitting at Evolved Movement Arts, during a Psytrance event, and I just happened to be sitting next to Anthony, and we start talking about music and music production. He's like, "Oh, have you heard of Oscillate?" I was like, "No, I haven't." And so that's how I got introduced to Oscillate. Next thing you know, a few months later, Matt, one of the board members, said, "Hey, you want to be part of the board?" And like, oh crap. So now I've been on the board of the Oscillate Collective, or more formally known as the Oscillate Electronic Performing Arts Society. for the last couple of years, and they've given me my first opportunity to do live performance sets. I would have like my Ableton Push 2 and use that to produce like a bunch of originals, and did like a half-hour set at Inshallah a couple of years ago, and then added another track, did a 45-minute set out at the Gazebo in East Village.
I love performing there. That's such a fun little venue.
It's a cool venue, and it was neat doing it there as well. So I managed to get like a few friends to come out, because I was like super excited, because of course for Inshallah you're down in Fort McLeod, you're 2 hours away from everybody, so unless you're down at the festival. But now this is like inner city Calgary, you can get your friends to come and check it out. So I did have a few friends, and I was super stoked to be able to have that. And that was actually a learning experience to tell me I should have probably bought a MacBook Pro instead of a MacBook Air to at least have some fans to cool things. Because I think the first little bit I had the MacBook Air sitting in the sun, and then it throttles itself down just as I was about to get into like an intensive part of the track on J. Michael's big sound system there. So,
oh no, yeah.
So it's like it starts going all crunchy or whatever, and we quickly like put it on top of my audio interface and put it into the shade, and like almost immediately it cleared it up and whatnot. But lessons there is have your hardware if possible in the shade. Sun is not fun for many reasons, but with the first live set with the Push 2, and I guess this could play into a lot of DJ equipment if you're doing outdoor stuff, is you cannot see your lights in the sun, so you have to be prepared for stuff like that. But this year was actually when I started kind of actually getting into DJing. I was inspired to get into it with vinyl. That's actually where I ended up starting my record collection, was because I wanted to DJ. But now I've got like rock and all sorts of other stuff. But I also happened to buy like a few 12-inch singles and promo records and stuff off Discogs a while back, and come to find out today they're actually quite valuable now. But I still have yet to spin vinyl. And it just became a matter of, okay, if I want to start DJing, like just freaking start DJing. Like I had a controller that's been collecting dust for years and years, fucking start dusting it off. And of course through Oscillate I run into Atari. He invites me to do a gig at the Potion Room, and so that was my first time meeting even Error, because Error played after me as well, and get on this chat group. And next thing I see Nick K2, hey, anybody play melodic techno? I'm like, yeah, I play. And that's 0 days. That's when I got to meet you guys for the first time.
Wow,
was probably like my third time DJing was out at 0
Really?
days.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, or at least I should say third time DJing in public.
Yeah.
I think I did a couple Potion Room sets. So I mean, that was like cool. My first time doing a festival, and then a DJ dropped out for the opening slot, and you're like, oh, they were doing deep house, and it's like, oh, I got some ideas for that. So I got to do an hour and a half set to open up Saturday morning, and then the Sunday did the Sunday was kind of fun and interesting, just because I can't remember who it was that wanted us to shut her down, and then
there was like a tornado warning.
Yeah, there was some issue there, for sure.
Yeah, and then at a certain point,
things worked out in the benefit of you, actually, right?
It did, and it was funny, because it's like, okay, I get started with maybe like 20 minutes left to go in my 2-hour set time, so I just kind of keep going through my set, and it's like, okay, it's the end of my set time. Are there any other DJs taking me over here or anything? It's like, nobody. And so I just keep playing. I'm at the end of my set. It's like, okay, well, I'll just keep spinning tunes. And I start cutting into his set, and he's coming in. It's like, hey, how are you doing? You feel ready to move on? I'm like, I mean, if you want, I still got music I could play whatever. So like he let me play an hour of his set, so I probably spun for like 4 hours.
That's awesome.
Well, I had a set on main stage the night before as well, so I wasn't too chapped about it. And then I think the guy who was after me like got delayed or something like that happened, so I ended up playing like another hour of garage or something like that afterwards. It was good.
Yeah,
it was a really fun festival. Are we looking at doing that again this year or next year?
Yeah, we're going to be hoping to. As I'm sure you guys know, the Pirates always have something up our sleeve, but we are trying to find a better location than what we had last year, because as we talked about before, and as I'm sure pretty much everybody that was there knows, we had some issues with the location and the people that were letting us use the land. So unfortunately, we're not going to be back at that location. It was a pretty good spot, but we are growing as well. So, we need kind of something a little bit more stable and reliable other than where we were.
Yeah.
But it was a good time for sure. And we are absolutely hoping to continue the Canada Day long weekend with 0 days craziness.
Yeah,
So.
that was a fun one. But yeah, it was funny for being like my first outdoor festival set to have like all of these things kind of work out in my favor. But I like sit back and I'm like, I can't believe I had the opportunity to do this, and now I'm like, I can't believe I also keep getting invited out to these events. And so, in the year of first outdoor, like first time DJing in public, first outdoor festival, had my first club set at level 3, and now I'm gonna try and actually organize my first rave for New Year's Eve as well. So it's been a fun year. It's absolutely been a fun year, especially getting to know so many people in the community. And I think that's been probably my favorite part so far, is just getting to know everybody in the community, because it's a whole new network that I haven't had before, and it's full of such awesome people too.
It's banging. I'm so stoked to be a part of this myself. Not sure why we're getting complaints of me being so echoey, so I'm just going to try and address this real quick here and see if we can.
Wonder if your voice is being picked up in our mics.
It could be, but we have a noise gate on here that should be stopping that from happening. So hopefully that will help a little bit. Yeah, and because it's you guys aren't talking super loud either, so it's got to be on that kind of fine line. Hit it again. Say something, please, guys.
Oh,
Sorry, just want to make sure this is okay. It seems like that's better. I'm not picking up your mics, but you are picking up your
Right
mic.
on, right on.
Hopefully, those of you that are watching can let us know if that's a little bit better. Let's move on here. If anything, what do you guys find are the biggest things that are holding you back as artists, or in the scene personally?
For me, it's mental capacity. Said earlier, I tend to have a lot of things on the go outside of this. Like aside from work, I sit on the Oscillate Performing Arts Society, and while that one's focused a lot on live performance, I don't do as much live performance right now because my focus is side of things. So opportunity, even through Oscillate, despite being on the board, tend to be a little more limited. Um, but I'm president of the Cochrane Tours Association, well, so that, especially now, like this year, when I kind of stepped into the president's role and our new executive director, it's been taking a lot of my extracurricular time there as well. So I do have to contend with the fact that I'm effectively a professional volunteer. I like doing things to support people, and then of course we had the Cochrane light up that took a lot of effort to plan. And
Big shout out for you for that, by the way. That was awesome to get the pirate ship out in the winter again. We like in our winter shows, and one of the things that you had said during that was actually it resonated with me because it's kind of funny because that's what we're about. Basically, posted something on Facebook that was along the lines of like whether it's rain, sun, snow, wind, like storming, it doesn't matter. The pirates are out there basically, and yeah, we are because like that's just what we do. The weather doesn't matter. It's not about that. Like we're out there, we're doing it regardless.
yeah, so leading up to that, like I knew November was going to be a shit show, and I was looking forward to November being done before it would even started, because we had the Sync Sound and Image conference with Oscillate, and then 2 weeks later was Light Up, so that was taking a lot of my time as well. So I know this year I've been trying to pull back on a few things, because I also sat on the board of the Rocky Mountain Rotary as well. So as well as the Cochrane Chamber of Commerce. So I'm no longer involved with those. So I've been able to focus more of my time. But the challenge that has led to is now it's allowed me to focus more of my time in some of those organizations that I am involved with to give more quality time. But it didn't necessarily mean I was focusing more of that time on myself and my own personal development. So that's something that I got to start working on coming into the new year, is try and spend a bunch on myself.
You mentioned ADHD earlier or whatever, and it seems like a lot of people with the ADHD who are in the scene or doing this neurodivergent, whatever, have their fingers in a whole lot of pies. Hey,
I
Nate,
don't have the attention span for that.
Nate, what about you? What do you feel like is holding you back?
I mean, there's a couple of elements that are by design and some not. So, I'm going to talk about Unknown Artist, the brand again. I'm sorry.
Of course.
But like part of the brand with Unknown Artists, and like part of the original joke about that like spawned the name for me, like goes pretty far back. Like it goes back to like, you remember LimeWire? You ever use LimeWire?
Yeah, of course, back in the
Yeah.
day.
So there was no metadata in any of those. Didn't exist. It was unknown artist
Yeah,
every time
yeah,
producing all
that's
that
very
music.
true for sure.
So when I was thinking about the brand and how I wanted to deepen the experience for the audience, I feel that like unknown artist needs to seem like it has always been there, to seem like it has always existed. It needs to feel something like a mystery. Like, I don't know if you've ever watched any time travel trope kind of stuff. I love time travel stuff, but there's in some of those kinds of movies a sequence where they're looking at pictures through the years, right? And then they're like, wait, who's this guy? He's in all these pictures, right? And it's like, if I could direct unknown artist into a moment where it's like, wait a minute, this guy's been on stage, this guy's in the background over here, we've seen him over here, it could be a bit of a fun breadcrumb trail for people to follow. So like with that in mind, I'm not moving quickly. I haven't produced a lot of like stickers. There's not a lot of like the brand is an idea and like a process as opposed to a sellable, like, vendable item, so to speak. So I'm okay with moving slowly. For me, the success is going to be how widely I can like expose unknown artists to the audiences and how I can connect with organizers, event planners, media, whatever it's going to be. How I'm able to connect with those people in a way where unknown artists can feel like it was always there. It doesn't need to be on the poster necessarily, whatever it wants to be, but I'm okay with like a really slow burn on this brand where it's like it's sort of like like I said, has to feel like it was always there. But
That being said, AI can actually help you with that, right? Because you want to put yourself in all these pictures like he was
yeah,
always
that
there.
could be fun.
You can just edit yourself in. It seems like these days, so that's
Yep.
that's actually kind of cool.
Yeah, you're
that,
not wrong. That could be
that way.
could be the magic of showbiz, baby.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, movie
But
magic for sure.
but other than that, I don't have a full set of my own music yet. And that's going to be really tough for me to come to like to create because I don't want to stick with any particular genre. And
Really are all over the place, and I love that. Like,
but that said, and we're going to get into stems more later.
Yeah,
the power of stems might like drastically shorten that process.
Okay.
Because of the ways that stems and Tractor are able to like put sets together. And we're going to touch on that later. So
Yeah,
we'll go
for sure, for
let's
sure.
let's stop it at I need to make more of my music. I can't just play other people's music.
Before we move on to the next one, just real quick, I know we were kind of talking a little before the show, but you guys both use Ableton, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. So Ableton Live. I'm also a big proponent of Ableton, and for new producers, I recommend just starting with Ableton. In my opinion, there is other ways people tend to say they climb the ladder. They start with something a little more user friendly or whatever it is. I find Ableton works for me. Being ADHD brain myself, like it was a learning curve at first, as unknown artists had mentioned. We were talking a little bit before the show, but it's worth it in the end. I know a lot of people are. There's so many options, and a lot of people are kind of where to start. Ableton's a really good starting point. It has a lot of flexibility and allows you to do a lot of stuff. Have you guys heard of Bitwig?
No.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so Bitwig is something that a lot of people are actually talking about. A lot of producers, it's like Ableton's predecessor, kind of. It's like people are saying it's very similar to Ableton. I haven't actually tried it myself
I think
yet.
it was some
but
former Ableton engineers that ended up starting that project.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. But I've heard it's actually almost better than Ableton in some ways. So just an interesting side note there. I want to talk a little bit about what are some of the biggest challenges in the scene as a whole and how do we solve them? Because, I mean, we are a big community. We are a group. We're all working together and nobody really gets to the top alone. We all got to kind of keep working together to make each other better and bigger, So how do we solve the main challenges that are holding maybe the entire scene back is another good way to phrase this.
Interesting one, because start kind of getting a little more into market dynamic stuff like that as well. Because like you look out in Europe and Asia where a lot of electronic music is already quite popular. There's a shortage of opportunities. It's like if I wanted to, like we're in a city of almost 1.5 million, I want to find a record store that focuses on like gay records and electronic music records. Fuck no. But you could probably count on one hand or two hands how many of them you could probably find in London, or within a 5-hour drive from London. got multiple countries with a 5-hour drive of London as well. So like there are some cultural challenges. It's one of the challenges I find, and this is where I'm gonna kind of use this whole New Year's Eve rave thing as a bit of an experiment too, because Cochrane is very much a country music town, and try and get kind of people thinking outside of that, or outside of like the whole pub style mentality. Like we very much have like a pub and club mentality here, which is it's quite a bit different than what a lot of us are kind of used to when we think about going out to raves, and it goes beyond just the like the stereotypes and the drugs and things like that might be involved, more about the community and the vibe that it's all about. And so I think we're kind of in a bit of a challenging place right now, is because there's still a lot of that those problems that the rave community had to deal with from the 90s that are still very much in play today. That isn't necessarily as much at play out in Europe and Asia. No different than we had to deal with in the alcohol industry, the whole issue of prohibition, because there's a lot of stuff around prohibition that still exists today that make it difficult for manufacturers to try and do certain things in the concept of public. Like that's only something the city of Calgary just started experimenting over the last few years, and this is getting close to a century ago that with prohibition. When we talk about the crackdown on rave culture, that's only a generation ago, not close to a century. Like there's a lot of people that had wanted nothing to do with it that are still around today that we still have to contend with. That's probably going to be one of our biggest challenges, because within the community, we get it, we understand it. Everybody's trying to be well behaved. We're trying to do good for the community, and some of us individually, other things outside of it that support the community, whether it's being involved in folk fests and within the music itself. But a lot of those
the Sync conference, as you mentioned, right?
Yeah, in the Sync conference. But a lot of the people that we want to try and expand the market as. So it's a question of how do we do that, and trying to do that is a very, very difficult thing, and can take 10, 20 years to try and actually start shifting those minds. I go around Cochrane, it's like people that are interested in what we're doing that I would talk to, they'd almost be whispering, "Oh yeah, let me know when you're doing it," and they're in their 50s and stuff. And meanwhile, I've got I've got a daughter, and see these young kids like New Year's Eve. I just want to go find a place where I can get shit faced. It's like, well, why? Like, no, let's
Let's not the point. Like, exactly.
We're developing an experience, and it doesn't mean going to get shit. So we have to contend with stuff like that too within the newer generation as well. Unfortunately, I don't have a straight answer to that, because I think the challenge we have right now is I think we got a fantastic rave community as it is, but it's coming to the point where a lot of the ravers now want to be DJs, and we're starting to get to a point where within the community we're short on venues for the amount of people that want to actually be able to perform at those venues. The opportunity to develop more venues is fairly limited, because more of the venues that are popping up are just going to be more pubs, clubs if you're lucky, but mostly pubs. More.
Not only that, I mean, I find like the scene is really cliquey too, and we talked about this in a previous podcast as well. But like a lot of groups only want to play the same few DJs or whatever it is, and then it's the same group of people supporting them all the time, and it's kind of like just that click that goes around. Some people enter, some people leave, but it's not like trying to expand and grow together on a larger scale. Whereas in the UK, everyone's kind of like, yeah, let's start flowing together, work together. But again, we're 20 something years behind on the drum and bass thing here in Canada, right? Like it's only been big for 10 years. Drum and bass has been out for 30-ish years already,
90s or something.
So I think that's definitely part of it, and I think everybody
more opportunities
for sure, 100%. And that's one thing the Mountain Pirates are absolutely trying to do. Like, we're trying to break down the walls, break down the clicks, and give everybody opportunities. It doesn't matter if you're, brand new, if you just started DJing this year. We've had several of those people come on and they show their prowess, they show up for their sets and they throw down, and it's like, this is great. This is a good experience. You put them on a good stage, on a good sound system, and it's really just helping build each other up and stuff, I think, is what we need, rather than fracturing and being so clicky is the best way to describe it, I think.
Kind of have to approach, like with many things, that whole rising tide floats all boats thing. As long as we can try and work internally, I think that'll help towards it, but we still have to kind of think externally as to how we can create more interest into the vibe and the music stuff, instead of kind of being your typical rock. And I think that plays to kind of what we talked about earlier, the difference what's going on here. Edmonton is culturally different than it is here, and
100%.
and it's a lot more acceptable towards the rave community up here than we have down here. So we've got a bit of an uphill battle already, and so that, I think, is where I agree internally. If we can kind of avoid more of that clickiness, have more collaborative opportunities, because what I love with Oscillate is they're all about collaboration. I mean, I'd love to be collaborating with all sorts of different artists and producers and promoters and stuff to try and create new opportunities, have some of these smaller things be more visible to people that otherwise might not think about doing these. But it's
100%.
going to take time.
100%.
I feel like there's also sorry. I feel like there's also like a weird, like a disconnect, or not a disconnect or a barrier, but like a lot of people who get into the scene, a lot of those, a lot of people, their entry point is some of the larger, more manicured events. And I feel like that's a weird expectation, and it makes it harder to into the underground.
100%.
Because like finding an underground scene is an entirely different, like an entirely different process than being on Facebook, getting the targeted ad, and like going down to Chasing Summer or something.
Yeah.
Right. Like you have to meet people who are already in it, or you have to go find them.
And a lot of time, the people in the underground scene maybe are going to be not attending, the larger events.
Yeah. And like I still go out to like a big event probably once a year or something like that. But as I started like trying to find new kinds of music, I started to realize that the kinds of music that I had originally been exposed to were pretty much main stage, large scale event style music. And as someone whose like earliest entries into the EDM world was listening to the techno songs in the rave section of the first Matrix movie, as I got into the larger scene, I realized that it wasn't what I was expecting, and over time I started to feel like it wasn't really what I was looking for. So as I started to pay attention and I went to find communities, and as time progressed, I feel like as I lost interest in that, I started to feel like, okay, so like how do people transition from the big manicured event, which is like maybe one or two local guys and all these acts that get brought in, there's stages, there's the production value, there's a lot of art and like really cool art that goes into it, but like, as it doesn't support the locals. If anything, it takes away, because you end up competing for these big weekends and all that
100%.
other kind of stuff. So like there's a part of me that feels like the actual format for the large scale EDM event is a bit of a barrier to finding maybe the smaller local communities, which is the moment where we all get our chance.
I really like that analysis. I was at a party the other night that I was playing, and I had this chick come up to me, and she's one of our awesome supporters and has been to a bunch of our events throughout the summer. And she was saying basically exactly that. Like, I was going to all these other bigger events, and I thought that this was what the scene was about. But then I found your guys' events, and I feel so comfortable and at home and spreading love and like these old school vibes. And well, I mean, she doesn't know their old school vibes, but it's this crazy vibe you guys got. And it's the old school rave vibe.
Yeah, that's
it's
how
the
it was.
plur, it's the...
It was a place for people who didn't feel accepted in the mainstream. And then, mainstream, as it became more popular, more people were exposed to it. And, we've ended up, like I said, with these sort of more manicured, large scale, corporatized events, as opposed to like really an oasis where you can enjoy yourself and the community free of judgment.
Yeah. I guess that also comes down to being kind of another clique in itself,
Yeah, absolutely.
Move on and talk a little bit about something that we all have in common. We'll get a little bit more in depth into this here. So integrating acoustic and analog instruments into digital productions. I know Pinpoint, as we've been talking, you're all in on the analog and modular synths, which is super cool. I know when we had that podcast at Nick's, Nick K2, Buck Nasty, B Nasty Beats, we were discussing the Tonto synth and some other cool stuff there, some VSTs and productions as well. And I find that super fascinating because I don't really dig in. Like I said, I have the microchord, but I don't get too deep into that. And again, I know we kind of touched on this at the beginning, unknown artist, but you're consistently surprising us with crazy multi-genres, and you play the saxophone. And I mean, I'm sure you have other surprises up your sleeve as well. So I just like to kind of discuss why, or and how we create the music and bring together acoustic and electronic and make it so magical and awesome.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so I like on my end of things, like I said, I've got a bit of a pre-existing education from. I was lucky enough to arrive to DJing with that already like somewhat developed. And like as much as musical education can give you up, like I feel that one of the things that plays most into multi-genres is the history of music and what came from what, where you started. So like, back to the 1600s or whatever, you have Baroque and like continuations through classical music up until the 1800s, when stuff started to get a little bit stranger, and some of the religious pulls and like, oh, you can't play minor keys, like that's a bit for, but there's been stigmas around different. So like I don't know, that's such a tough one to answer. I actually forgot where I was going. Can you
Fair enough. No, it's all good.
can you
think
can you
about
prompt me?
Yeah,
how
for
you're
sure.
integrating your
Yeah,
live
that's right.
stuff
That's
into
right.
what you're doing.
That's
yeah.
right. Tangents, ADHD. Anyway, I'm
Right?
sure you guys know.
Yeah.
And yeah, so if you understand the history of music, and the way that like genres are born from variations of other genres, like in the EDM industry, we're very used to it. Like even like what we were talking about earlier with D&B Jungle, like that's just two, but like I bet if I were to ask you, you could probably name off 10 genres of D&B with like
Yeah, exactly.
not too
Right.
much.
Yeah.
But it's like if you
And the
really
same goes for house and whatever else, right?
yeah. So like if you really if you try to understand the music in terms of like what its inspirations, where it references, what it was built out of, it allows you to to you know to play sort of as you want to, and adding instruments. Instruments are the way that music was for hundreds thousands of years. If you understand like where it came from, integrating instruments you've done a lot easier, because that music was based on something that had a saxophone, and so it's more likely to fit. So that's if you want to integrate it directly. There's like a pre-understanding where you can look at it and say, okay, like house has roots in disco. So if I were to, this isn't instrument specific, this is sort of a comparison, but it's like, okay, how many, there's even a genre called disco house, right, where it's like disco but with more drums.
Yeah.
Right. So it's you know understanding where the music comes from gives you the opportunity to add instruments in, because they all sort of come from this.
For sure. I want to kind of touch on this music history. It's a little bit kind of off topic, sort of, but a thought I've always had, and it's just a theory, of course, but all this stuff that we're doing today, with the electronic music, these crazy synths, these sounds, these really crazy in-depth, wavetable stuff, you're just getting these crazy sounds. Like, where does this come from? This can't be natural, right? But then to me, I look at it like this, like you see these beatboxers and they're able to come up with some real alien shit, like they're able to mimic a lot of the stuff that people are putting in these synthesizers. And maybe 20, 30, 40, 50,000 years ago, this has all been done. Maybe even just 10,000 years ago, but cavemen were probably beatboxing and figuring out a lot of this stuff. So there's jokes going around in the memes and stuff. Dubstep is, the language of the aliens or whatever it is, right? Like stuff like that. And it's like, maybe there is kind of a little bit of merit to that,
I think the didgeridoo is such a weird.
I really want to learn that.
This might be totally out there. Who knows? But,
should have brought my jar.
when you look at a didgeridoo, it's a cylinder that vibrates and oscillates. And when you look at like the waves that come out of it, it's like similar sine waves. And the didgeridoo is a pretty old one, but other similar instruments. So I think that these sounds have always been with us. You're right. I think they've always been with us, and this is just the more modern interpretation.
It's interesting you mentioned the didgeridoo too, because We were talking earlier about how, frequency is everything, and possibly like maybe the pyramids were built with frequency. There's theories regarding that. I've seen a video recently. The didgeridoo, when played, can pick up like a ping pong ball or whatever. Just from the frequency, it can actually like make the ping pong ball levitate like within like a little area of the end of the didgeridoo. It's pretty cool.
I haven't seen that. I'll have to look that
Yeah,
up.
So
yeah, I'd
for
imagine
sure.
that'd almost be simple. So when you have like a water stream speaker,
Yep.
Same idea for sure.
yeah, kind of creating a cavitation point that it can sit in between. If you have the wavelengths just right, now we're getting into physics and
Right.
acoustics.
Well, hey, that's like this is another really weird thing about do 2 more minutes of this.
All good. It's all
It's
good.
such a weird thing because like when you look at the like Western music theory, we as animals were like basically blind men feeling around the walls of a dark cave with no idea what was. But then as time went on and all of a sudden we have computers and we have wave theory, you start to realize that harmonics follow a specific mathematical pattern. It's like it's this crazy thing where we just figured it out without really having like any solid understanding of it, but it all works. Very strange.
What about you, Pinpoint? I'd like you to talk a little bit about some of this stuff because I know you're really into the modulars. You've done some performances. You were talking a little bit earlier about how you do the live performances less these days, of course, but you do also do the modular synthesis where you have to put wires from here to here. You were talking earlier as well before we started the podcast about some paper patches where you have to like draw out. I'd like you to kind of delve into this a little bit because it's something that I find really fascinating.
Yeah, so I guess it depends on the perspective we want to take the discussion. Yeah, there's many different rabbit holes we can go go on this one. I think first I might kind of address more of the performative aspect, for instance, and I put a bunch of thought into it for a while, but it wasn't until we had Daedalus out and do a session at the Sync Sound and Image conference because he was talking a lot about performance. The thing is when you get into like the hardware side of things, like you ran into this issue, you might find yourself trying to do too much. And when I was visiting my uncle in Kentucky back in February, he's like a concert pianist. He's been a concert pianist for as long as I've known. Married into the family, but let's say 30 years, for as long as I've known him, concert pianist. Probably been playing the piano for probably 45, 50 years for all. And I showed him a video that fascinated the hell out of me. It was one of Lisa Belladonna's live performances, and the thing that he said, it kind of resonated with me because it's something that does attract people to live performance when they know what's going on. His issue was he could not relate what he was hearing to what he was seeing. So that ends up becoming a challenge where, okay, now if I'm trying to think about how I can do things as a live performer, how can I make things happen in such a way that's somewhat engaging? And so I look back, okay, yeah, I did some live performances working with Ableton. And because I couldn't see my lights, it was literally just me, okay, this row's almost done. Let's activate that row. Let's activate that. Like there's nothing interesting for somebody to watch other than to hear come out. It's actually kind of why I don't mind the idea of playing other people's DJing, because it's like I love the music and just my passion and being able to just be like and shit like that on the stage and just get other people stoked about it. That's my performance right there. It's just getting people excited about what I'm playing. But when it comes to the music side of things, you have to start thinking about things a little differently. And I almost look at, say, like Casablanca as almost a perfect example. If I was to do like a live performance, they would be kind of where I want to go because they're active on stage. They're grabbing different gear. There's one when I was at the Above and Beyond Group Therapy Weekend or at the Gorge last year, and you'd have them do like, it was the first time they did the cover of Breathe by Prodigy live, and you saw one of the guys hold up his Behringer TD3 with the acid bass adjusting things, and the crowd can see it while he's adjusting it, and And it was kind of neat because when I was there, I was in this section where I'm just hanging out with the shade. And I didn't even realize it was a live performance, but I knew just listening there was something different about what they were doing. And then, like halfway through the set, I finally looked at the stage. I'm like, "Oh shit! There's a Moog Sub 37 on there." So I didn't realize they had this massive whole live setup, and it was just so cool. And honestly, the way that they put their set together, like they stole the weekend. Not just that show, like they didn't just do a good performance, they stole the whole weekend. Everybody was Casablanca. They were the only guys doing a live performance. But they engage the crowd so well. They're passionate, and you can almost hear that passion in how they perform their stuff. But once again, you got to be careful about doing too much. And as me as individuals, like, okay, well, I could go do the DJ thing. If I just focused on that, most of the stuff I have in my studio, I probably don't need. I really don't need. I spent way too much money on all the hardware I've got in my studio, and probably the only thing that I've made use of that's made me any money has been the Polybrute, and that's when I would do like meditative sound baths with it. That's about it. So trying to figure out how you can integrate that. Well, the next step I'm kind of thinking of is okay, now I've got like like my deck of choice is the Pioneer XDJ XZ, and I'm looking at potentially getting the DJS 1000. Happened to pop over to DJ Donanox's place there last week, and he got one of those, and okay, start playing around with it, and I got kind of the hang of the sampling aspect. But I like the fact that it's got the ability to send MIDI out as well. So I really want to kind of play around with the idea of live sampling a synthesizer, or being able to have my synthesizer plugged in and just simply play into something, or play something over top of something else, that you can have something visually performative that I can both engage with and just show that passion of how I'm trying to play this, while also having the crowd feel me on that. That I think when it is the challenging thing to do and think about, because I can go and set up my modular, and I can sit there with a whole bunch of wires and twist knobs, but people are going to see that and not know what is doing what, or why they're hearing this weird sound.
Some people appreciate it more than others for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and I like with Daedalus, like he kind of, because his setup was almost similar to kind of doing a push two type thing, but it was very different. Like it was this old controller he had custom made, and all it is just a whole bunch of buttons on a grid that are lit up. That's all you see. But he positions it so the crowd sees it, and that's how he performs. And he's very like, it's like boom, and it's like just he's just totally into it in how he performs his stuff, and it's like that was almost more cool to see than, because I wasn't a huge fan of the sounds and the music he was creating, but I loved the passion to which he was creating it, and just seeing him interact with his instrument stuff. And I think that's the important aspect of trying to figure out, like, if you're going to be using any live gear, do that, because you can already do that as a DJ, anyways, playing other people's music.
I guess you kind of answered the question that I was going to ask, which is like, why do you prefer analog synths over, a VST synth? But
Interaction.
and that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
How about this though? Do you find there's a big difference? Because like, I don't really play with analog synths. I haven't had a lot of experience with them, but I know there's a lot of like matched VST synths to analog synths that are available. Do you find that the VST synths are a good representation of the original analog synths when you use them side by side?
Oh, 100%. The question is, it just depends on the sound you're going for. Like there's no matched representation of an Ovation Summit. With the Novation Summit, you get pretty close if you're trying to get something that could, say, replicate a Roland JP8000, or a handful of other synthesizers. But when you're looking at the different synthesizers, you're kind of looking at certain capabilities that they have, the type of sound they produce, and if you're going to be utilizing it for anything live, is how you can actually interact with it. And like I've had synthesizers that I brought into my studio and got rid of. Like I had a roll, or not actually I did have a Roland System one. It was a cool synthesizer. It, had the same super saw model that pretty much defined trance music way back when with the G8000. and stuff, but it still just felt like a toy to me, and I eventually kind of got rid of it. I had like a little Mavis semi-modular unit, and it was cool. I liked the sound of it, but it wasn't. I wanted the Moog sound. I wanted the sound of the Moog filter, but once again, it kind of sounded like the toy version of the Moog.
I'd
But
like to jump in. Correct me if
Please.
I'm wrong, but like even like let's say you were to take five of those synths, they would all sound different because of the
yes,
different impedances on all the soldering and all that
well, the
kind of
thing is,
stuff.
like okay, you say analog synth. I would say physical synthesizers, because like the Virus TI or any of the viruses are DSP based. They're digital synthesizers,
Okay,
even though
okay.
they're hardware. The Novation Peak, Novation Summit, that one is a hybrid synthesizer, so it uses a FPGA or field programmable gate array. Um, Tech people would understand it, but it's essentially like a digital circuit that runs the oscillators at 25 megahertz. It'll go out into an analog circuit for the filters and then back into digital for the effects again. Um, so that's where they got that whole concept of a hybrid
I
synthesizer.
see. I've heard of it talked about. You just kind of broke it down a little bit. So that's pretty
Yeah,
cool to understand a little bit more
yeah.
about that.
If you look at, say, the Arturia Polybrute, that one is a digitally controlled analog synthesizer with a digital effect stage. So it's 6 voices. Each of those voices and filters are fully analog, so they have to have a whole board for each voice stuff in there. Um, so it's going to have its own capabilities, but it's also Arturia's board and hardware that they put together, more playing to like if you're different circuits and different resistors or whatever, that all kind of play into that sound. Because then I've got the Moog Matriarch that is 100% analog. It's got a analog bucket brigade delay stereo effect on it. It's got the analog stereo filter and all analog oscillators and analog and it's all analog, but it sounds nothing like the Arturia Polybrute. So it's like if you're going to buy a piano, Yamaha is not going to sound the same as this other brand of
For
piano
sure,
that you're
for
going to
sure.
get, or if you're buying a guitar, it's like a Gibson and Fender aren't going to have the same sound to it. You're going to like find different guitars for different reasons. The same thing with when we're looking at these instruments, and so like I can look at it from a VST perspective. Like if I go to get like the Arturia Mini V, well, I might as well just like I have that. Well, why would I want to buy a Mini Moog Model D for $7,000 when I can just get the whole? Unless I want to be able to physically interact with it, there's not a whole lot of a reason for me to do it. Unless I'm trying to do something a little different, software side of things, because I know I can do some different things with my Matriarch that I can't really do easily on the software side of things. Then you can stick with the software side, because like the Mini V doesn't sound that much different. Like unless you're like really critically listening to it, I could still make that Tom Sawyer saw sound off of Mini V the same way Geddy Lee did it on his old 1976 or whatever 70s model year Mini Moog that he was doing the exact same sound on. I'm not going to sound the same as Matriarch, because Matriarch is a little darker of a sound, but that's why the Model D is kind of its own thing. The oscillators and filters sound slightly different, have a slightly different timbre. But when you're trying to replicate that stuff, yeah, Acid V will probably sound almost identical to, to the original TB03 or TB303 or the Behringer TD03 for that acid base, and it's got more features on it.
Man,
So,
I gotta say, so fun listening to you talk about this. You know so much
Right?
about this. I don't know.
Right?
I barely know anything about zip. So much fun. I feel like I'm getting a whole education.
yeah, well, I mean, I contemplated like I really liked when unfortunately, when Dave Smith passed away, he was collaborating to come out with the Oberheim OBX8, which is basically a recreation of the original OBX-A. And there you go, like another $6,000 analog synthesizer there. But once again, Arturia's got the OBX-A as one of the software synth plugins that they have available to it, and it sounds great. And it's relatively easy to play with and has a lot of great presets. Save yourself the $6,000 and just get the Arturia Synth V package, and you'll have a whole lot of those. Hell, you can get a CS80 in there. Who wants to spend $100,000 on a used CS80 off Reverb? Not me.
Give my perspective on this a little bit. I'm a multi-instrumentalist myself. I started, playing drums and, some other instruments, but mostly percussion stuff in junior high school, and progressed into guitar and all that kind of stuff. So when I use electronic mixed with analog instruments, in my case, I do a little bit differently. So I'll bring in the guitar, I'll bring in some bass or whatever. I'll start writing a tune. In my case, I'm writing some deathcore stuff, and I'm also writing some funk music. I got a whole funk album that's going to be coming out eventually. Once I finish it up, I want to write a few more tunes for it. But when you want more bass, I find like it's easy enough, when you're working in Ableton already, just throw in a nice sine bass to add more boom to your bass. You can really bring that kind of electronic feel and those vibrations into music that necessarily doesn't have it all the time.
Yeah.
I find a lot of time rock, funk, whatever. Yeah, that's a good way to describe it for sure.
Brainworks has a really good subsynth plugin that you can add to whatever layer you're doing, and will basically follow the frequency, kind of set the sub bass synth in it to kind of add a little more depth to an instrument.
Bassworks, eh?
Brainworks.
Brainworks,
I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. Pretty sure it's Brainworks. It's called Subsynth.
Okay, Subsynth by Brainworks. Okay, cool.
Yeah, worth looking into. It's a neat plugin. Got lots of stuff going on, because it will even allow you to pick the frequency you want to mono below as well, so you can kind of get rid of any mud or stereo in frequency ranges that it's not going to matter.
Very cool. Very cool. I find like a lot of genres, it was really defined, but there wasn't like a lot of, as the internet, gets more and more widespread and stuff, more people talk and things change, but it wasn't super defined. And now all the genres are kind of, there's so many subgenres and shit. It's like things are kind of just starting to mash together. And a lot of time you see, for example, recently, I saw a dubstep tune, or I heard a dubstep tune, I should say, but it had some amen breaks in dubstep tune. And, I was just like almost shocked, right? Because I love my amen breaks. I love dubstep. It's like in my brain, I would have never connected them, but it's like, okay, just throw it in. It's quick, it's like half a bar or whatever, but it's there, everything's kind of mashing together and just becoming one thing. Like there's good music in every genre, as an artist was saying earlier, and there really is, but it's like always evolving, and it's just so fascinating,
That's what I find kind of interesting, is I kind of do more of the DJ stuff. Of course, now I got this weekly show that I do on wickedbeatsradio.co.uk every Wednesday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Is I try to play like new music all the time. There's very rarely I'll play the same track. So I start deep diving into stuff, and the problem I find is like this I'll call the Casablanca problem, is when I got into this, they're literally what I wanted to try and be and still do want to try and be as a musician, but trying to find others that are creating music with similar sounds is so freaking difficult. And so when you get people that are innovative and doing some really cool stuff, it's going to take time for other artists to try and start doing some similar stuff that can kind of work with that. And that's
for sure.
Yeah, and that's kind of like what that reminded me of when you're talking about how seeing like an amen break come into that, and now you want to see, what are other people going to come up with to try and that idea.
There's
some of their stuff too.
I'm cutting you off. There's an interesting DJ style that I noticed, at least in the regional, British Columbia, Alberta festivals this year, and maybe I just wasn't paying attention, but it's like it seems to be this mixing style where you use other genres as build up and transition elements while remaining in the parent genre. So like one thing I've been hearing a ton of is like D&B artists that'll have hardcore buildups and breaks
and like
in
four
it.
on the floor stuff.
Exactly,
Yeah.
And then it kicks back into the break as the head hits.
Mandy Dexterous is a big.
Mandy. Okay.
She's the kind of the front running that stuff.
I love Mandy Dexterous.
She's also trans, so shout out.
My head is still rolling.
Definitely pretty cool. Let's
Do you
move
want
on
to
and talk a little bit about acceptance of some of the new technologies in the DJ sphere. I mean, from AI to forward-thinking gear manufacturers, stuff like how Serato went from scratch live, 10, 15, 20 years
Yeah,
ago,
you
whatever it
need to have
was.
the extra little box and
Yeah,
everything to
and
go with
there's
it.
always issues a lot of times, and all these extra wires and stuff, and CDJs didn't used to be linked without a cable and all this other stuff. You know, to now, and I also want to talk about the sync button, maybe a little bit about Serato Studio, streaming services, direct to DJ gear as well. I think that's pretty fascinating. So let's dig into this.
What is directed DJ? What is that?
Just direct to like how you can so for example on this standalone control that I have, it's a Denon Prime 4. You can go direct from Beatport, I think,
Oh,
and
okay,
yeah.
yeah.
Spotify. Serato's also doing this as well.
Yeah,
And that wasn't a thing, a little while ago. So
Okay, yeah.
I don't use streaming services personally, but it's just one of those features that was implemented. That's kind of it's a new technology, and I kind of just wanted to also touch on that.
I
So
think
let's start there. I
I
guess you
guess
guys use the streaming services at all in your DJ software?
I don't.
I do.
You do?
Yeah.
I don't really, but like I still see the value in it, the potential for it. Because like as a DJ, everybody's got a different idea of what they want to what they want to be able to perform and like show the crowd. But having access to all that music without having to like go and find it on Bandcamp, find it on Sound, download it, having to sit there and analyze it and do all the rest of it, and having it just available at your fingertips is like really powerful. Especially in situations where people requests. Like not to say that
Good call.
not to say that like not saying anything about wedding DJs. I make some money doing that during the summer too. It's a lot of fun. I'm available. Feel free to book me.
Pimp yourself up.
Exactly. Hit that like and subscribe button. But having the ability to play anything is huge, because like as a DJ, you're always trying to create a story. You're trying to play stuff that the crowd likes. You're trying to create an experience, and having everything at your fingertips like that's huge. You can do whatever you want to do. So it creates it creates more ability to be more variable in your sets, which I think is a fantastic feature.
100%. I think it's pretty cool too. I don't use it myself personally, but it's interesting to see. You can even get a SoundCloud on there, and I find SoundCloud is a spot where you can get a lot of really new stuff, unreleased stuff that you can't find elsewhere. So it's definitely interesting to have that for sure.
I've kind of embedded I don't use it for anything like any gig work, and especially because we're out in the middle of nowhere.
A lot of times, yeah, for sure.
We're doing it is like I always make sure that whatever I'm playing is I'm buying it. But because I do my weekly radio show from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on radio.co.uk every Wednesday, I generally need to be going through new music a lot. And it can get really, really freaking expensive to be doing volunteer sets, to always be buying tracks. And so I've actually incorporated it as part of my vetting process for music that I am going to choose to buy. And so I've kind of have my strategy where now I have like all of these Beatport playlists. When I first started using Beatport, I didn't make use of playlists that much in Beatport, but now I will have like these various different genres that I kind of like, whether it's peak time or progressive house or melodic techno, sci-tech, whatever. And I start liking artists, liking labels, and I'll start going down that rabbit hole where every Friday when new music starts drops, I might spend that weekend trying to go through the latest music and like, no, don't like that. Oh, okay, I'll add that to that playlist. Add that to, because it costs me nothing to add it to playlists and whatnot. And if it's once it's in that playlist, then I'll go to my preparing for my weekly radio shows. So this is where I like with Record Box, I can drag and drop Beatport tracks into playlists in there and still be able to play them with my XDJ through USB. So I'll create these playlists. I might have maybe 70%, sometimes 100, but rarely 100% of the tracks in the playlist will be like Beatport streaming tracks. And so if I'm now going to make a decision as to which tracks I want to buy for doing live stuff, I'm going to probably go back to the playlists that I used to play on my radio show. If I decided they were good enough that I'm going to actually play them on my weekly show, then I'm going to use them most likely frequently
So does
when I
it
start
work
doing
in
it for
just a way
live.
where you can browse your playlists that you already have set up on these
Oh yeah,
other services?
yeah. So I'll fire up the Beatport. I can see the playlist, but further to that, there's sometimes, because it's a UK station, is during the wee hours of the morning, there's no DJs. They'll have like the auto DJ playing whatever crappy music they're playing, and I'll just pirate the stream and just start doing whatever. And so there's this one record label that like, especially if you're into like peak time techno, I kind of came across Crude Eye Records. I think they just started releasing music back in April or something like that this year. But the more I listen to the tracks that they're releasing, I'm like, whoever's doing the A&R for this label knows what they're looking for. Like, they know exactly what they're looking for. And I would just pull up that label and then just start picking tracks I've never listened to, and just start playing them and start
Sweet.
streaming them. The other fun part about that, kind of, I guess, playing into the question on different technologies, that also kind of helped train me looking at waveforms to see kind of the common behaviors of producers stuff, where now I'm not necessarily thinking about how do I want to mix this track into this track, at which point I see, oh, that looks like an 8-bar intro. Oh, that looks like a 16-bar intro. Okay, that's about 16 bars there. That's about 8 bars there. And now I'm already just live. Okay, this is how I'm going to mix. This is how I'm going to mix. So most of the time I'm prepping the radio shows. I'm not like pre-practicing them or that. I just there might be a few tracks like, ooh, how does this sound next to this track? But I'm not playing the entire track. I'm just listening to the sounds and listening to the groove and the bass line. I might listen for 10 seconds, a minute, I don't know. Then try the other track. If I really want to see how it goes, then I might try a live mix. Otherwise, I'll just mix it on the fly. So I think that's one of the things that it's kind of helping with, by committing to these weekly things, to see more and more of what other, and start getting better and better at mixing without having to like do a lot of pre-prep or practice.
That's
Or
pretty cool. I might have to play around with that a little bit because, like I said, it's built into the decks there. So
yeah,
actually.
it's really useful for that.
On your radio show, though, you were talking. You actually play most of the tracks out, right? You're not doing the DJ type of radio show. You're doing more like an actual like radio
Yeah,
type of show.
because well, I will play most of the tracks out, but the thing that I find is a lot of the tracks that I tend to go towards, while they have a fixed structure to it, you'll have your build, intro, build up, break, drop, outro. Uh, that almost seems to be without exception. Is I like finding music where the producers actually have good content through most of the track. So I've only just recently started kind of playing around with like low frequency swaps. I might have like a remix of Silence by Delirium Sarah McLaughlin, that just before I'm playing this, I have this one track, I think, go on my SoundCloud, Pinpoint7, episode 17 of Precision Radio. There's a point where I play this Sarah McLaughlin track, but I kept the bass line from the track before that playing into it. So I haven't done that as often as I would like to, and I think this is just one of more my own personal growth as a DJ. Kind of playing around with ideas of, ooh, what if I took some psychedelic techno and just did the whole baseline swap thing there, not necessarily working with stems, but just the low frequency part of the spectrum, and kind of playing with that a bit. That's now starting to get my third deck if I want dick around with that stuff a little bit. But yeah, no, it's I don't know where I came from on that.
That's right. Let's talk a little bit about
Yeah.
Serato Scratch Live, because it kind of shaped part of my intro to the whole becoming a DJ and stuff. I went to Shambhala when I was 16, and I wasn't allowed to bars, obviously, but I went to Shambhala when I was 16, 17, and then 18. And by the time I was 18, I'd already met so many people in the scene and stuff that it was just an easy transition to start going to bars and to these shows. But that was my first real behind the scenes look of how everything worked. You know what I mean? And that's when I started really seeing everyone had the SL1200 Technics turntables or 1210s, whatever. I guess there's slight differences between them. But it's just fascinating to see that. And it's like, you're doing this on your computer. How many, how do you do this? How many songs can you have in your library? Like, it's not a record where you have, 5, 6 songs, whatever it is per side. And it was just like,
Or
wow. And then, things have progressed to such a point today where, like, you get these controllers like we have here, the Prime 4, which is a few years old as it is, but it's like a spaceship compared to that. It does all of this and then some, and it has built-in effects and all this other stuff. Like, we've come so far, and it's just so fascinating to see. And I mean, Serato plays a key part because so many DJs, including myself, use Serato to manage libraries and even play live a lot of time. I've kind of moved away from using Serato to play live personally. Side note, Serato Video, I've tried throughout the years, and I've never had great success with it. It always seems to be something weird about it. But Serato is integral to our culture, essentially, and I find it also the best library organizer, like metadata editor, that exists, in my opinion. How do you guys feel about the whole Serato situation?
I can only really talk about it tangentially. I don't have a ton of experience with Serato. I've only sort of learned to use it at a basic level because you don't always know what you're going to perform on. So it's, I've had the opportunity to have to use it. I find that it works pretty well. I know that I know some of my more successful DJ friends use it or like to use it for their home systems, but I'm not super well versed.
I started with Serato, and I thought it was great software. I haven't gotten too terribly in depth with metadata and stuff in that. Actually, probably 3 days before 0 days, decided fuck it and
Wow.
switch over to Rekordbox,
Okay.
which there was a bit of a learning curve to it. But the nice thing is I started to appreciate certain Rekordbox I couldn't in Serato, but vice versa. Well, it took a little to kind of, and I think it was when I first kind of rented that DDJ Flex 10 controller, because I went from the SB2, which is very much a Serato controller. And the first thing that took me a little bit to get used to was how effects work between Serato and Rekordbox. You basically have 3 knobs per deck within Serato, whereas you didn't have that box or
sure.
any controller that's designed specific for it, because it's designed to operate more like a club stand type setup.
Right.
So having your channel effects plus your channel colors, that became, it took a little to get used to, but now I'm actually kind of warming up quite a bit to that side of things. See where there is a bit of flexibility playing around with that setup. But when it comes to dealing with managing your libraries, managing your collections, one of the things that I kind of had to change it coming from Serato into Rekordbox, I basically had my library on my USB, and I could just plug it into my laptop or my workstation, and would pop up just as is there. It's not how it happens Rekordbox. Now I basically just, like, my workstation is my library, even though I have most of my music up on Google Drive. But the reason that I kind of went towards Rekordbox was because I did like this little tour at PK Sound and had an opportunity to play with their thousands there, and realized that, okay, well, it's great that these 3000s can do track analysis and stuff like that. The playlists and stuff, just unless my file system matched my my playlists and stuff, like, I was basically just looking at file names.
Yeah,
It
100%.
didn't matter if they were AIFs or
Yeah.
had metadata. I'm just looking at file names.
Yeah.
It was almost kind of out to lunch trying to sort through file names that way.
That comes kind of back to, though, DJs have to do their homework ahead of time for whatever gear they're using. I mean, I leave specific instructions for the Denon as well for people, before I'll put up a post and be like, if you do it this way, you'll have access to all the information. And I learned to actually had my first successful set at this party I had mentioned earlier that I played the other night on CDJs. I've tried them several times. There's always some issues, like you're saying. You're either looking at track names or whatever. I spent some extra time ahead of time getting Rekordbox, going through all the settings in Rekordbox, similar to how I would with Engine DJ, and figuring out, I'll change this to this. Oh, this makes sense now. Like, for example, turning quantize off is one of the things, when you're setting cue points and stuff, little things like that. So it definitely comes down to a little bit of DJs doing their homework.
Yeah, and it's probably the biggest reason I decided to make the switch is because like you want to play on a club standard system, or it's much easier to kind of move around or be portable uh, if you're able to work with record box and stuff. And I even had a great opportunity after the John Double O Fleming event. I could do this after party out at Todd and Annalise's place, and then they probably had like 30 people hanging out in the basement. I think Carlos had brought out his seat. They had a couple Nexus 2s and the EGM 900. And of course, my philosophy now is anytime I go to sync my library to USB, I actually sync to 3 USBs, and one of those USBs always stays on my keychain because you never know.
You never know. Always be
Sure
ready
enough.
as a DJ, right?
Yeah,
From,
well, I've
from
got
like 6:30 in the morning till noon, I'm spinning music.
Dang.
yeah, like it's kind of funny. Early on, and when I started preparing, and I kept finding myself on different systems, I just basically put 3 USBs on my little lanyard, and I've got Tractor, Serato, and Record Box. So we're
You're
like,
one step ahead of me now. Geez. Yeah.
Yeah, see, that's actually a smart way to do it because, in the case of Denon here, when you load a USB that has a record box,
yeah, it picks it up.
it'll pick it
Yeah.
up. So if I learned this the other day when I was preparing for my set with the record box and
I can't do
CDJs
that
there.
with Tractor.
I plug it in here and it's like, oh yeah, it's going to ask
No.
me every time.
No,
So having separate IDs is actually a really good idea in that case.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider that, like, and we're starting to move. I think technology's improved, but like up until recently, all the record box controllers were like, you have to be in this specific file format, and
Yeah.
if your USB is like larger than this certain size,
Doesn't
you got to
work, and-
download a
yeah,
different
yeah.
program, and it only works half the time.
Well, I think Tractor plays nicely with Serato, though.
Does it?
I think so.
I haven't tried.
Well, 'cause I'm trying to think. 'Cause before I started doing the public sets, and I'd be playing on Todd's system on Tractor, I'm almost certain that when I had my collection on USB, it would pick up my crates within Tractor, whereas with Record Box, like I plug that in, and I'm just basically trying to load from files.
Yeah, you got to pick one. Oh, that's in the wrong key. Okay, let's try again. Nope, that one's also in the wrong key. Nope, this one's the wrong speed. But
Well,
you
at
got to
least
wait every time.
At least when I download my Beatport stuff, the keys in the file name.
Oh, is it? Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
I want to kind of just step sort of half a step back here to where we were talking about the transition of how Serato kind of influenced moving from Technic turntables, which is super cool. They use a control tone with actual record players and all that, to kind of where we are, and involving the sync button as well. Also, just wanted to touch on, now that I'm thinking about it, just comes to my mind. They have those things as well now for, I think it's Serato possibly. They work with Serato, but I don't know if it's Serato that has developed it, I should say. It's like a thing you put on top of the record over like the little pin in the middle, and you don't actually need to put the record
like a
arm
little
on it or whatever.
gyro sensor kind of.
Yeah. Anyways,
They're kind of neat though.
pretty interesting there. But one thing that I really want to get into here is the sync button. That's something that was never available before on record players and stuff. And as controllers started to come out and things started to change and everything gets more popular, the sync buttons are on pretty much every controller. So what do you guys think about the sync button?
I'm a sync whore. I have no problems admitting that.
A lot of memes on the internet that are going back and forth, but it's
I know,
kind of just a
I'm on
funny
all those
thing
DJ groups. They're freaking hilarious
Yeah.
to watch those. But I mean, it comes down to, I mean, if I'm busy spinning and a DJ comes up and sees I'm using the sync button and yells, "This DJ's using a sync button," if that clears the dance floor, then hey, okay, maybe I'll stop using the sync button.
The
But
dance floor doesn't know what a sync button
I know
is.
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
But the way,
a lot of time they don't know for sure.
But the way that I'll put it, because it's like I do know how to beat match. I should probably practice it more because I do want to spin in vinyl. So I'll kind of go to another area to analogize it a little bit. So I've got my pilot's license, and we have this little device called an E6B calculator, and that's how you can kind of on the fly. It's this little analog device that you just twist or whatever, draw stuff on. You can figure out what your magnetic heading needs to be. You can kind of calculate your fuel burn and to destination on the flight. Like you got all these things right there on this analog device. Very difficult to learn how to use this thing, but everybody needs to know how to use that, even if you can get a calculator to do that. Because what if the calculator fucks up? Same thing with the DJ side of things. Like, what if you have a track that you load in and something screwy? Should still be able to. And even if I am using the sync button, like if it's syncing to the beat grid and the beat grid is not properly matched to the kick,
you have quantized turned on.
But
Yep.
yeah, like you still need to be able to hear when you're locked in
Yep.
and when you're not locked in, and as well. So it's a good core skill to have as a DJ. It's not the most important skill, but it's definitely like like a core skill to have in your skill set, or in your tool chest or toolkit or whatever. But there's other things I would rather be doing than trying to like, okay, when I was doing it tractors, okay, I'll match the BPMs with the slider. When you have that cheat there, you're just gonna match it with the slider anyways, and then just nudge the wheel until. Well, why not just use the sync button anyway?
Yeah.
You can see the BPMs. It's still cheap if you want to be like the purist vinyl guy.
I feel like it's a fantastic tool that sort of like ketchup, where you shouldn't use it everywhere, but like you could, kind of thing. Like I've played a lot of billiards, like pool, over the years, and I had this one buddy beat me one time doing the stupidest thing. He used the bridge on every shot so he could perfectly line himself up and have no wobble his on his like stroke patterns and stuff like that. So he was hitting perfect, beautiful shots every time, and it didn't matter where he was because he could literally line up the two things and just do it. So the bridge in pool is very important because if like there's a shot where you just can't lean over without pulling both feet off of the floor, which is uh, you have to use the bridge. But if you're using the bridge for every shot, then it's like, okay, what are you doing here? So for myself, and we're gonna get into stems more later. Once again, we're almost there. We've really been foreshadowing this stem. With stems, it gives you the ability to pull sections out of any song you want and recombine it with another song without having to worry about so much of the like frequency overlay on the 3 levels of notes. So, for someone who's like trying to have 4 tracks locked in using different parts from different songs, like what are you going to do? Try to be balancing them and jogging 4 wheels at the same time when you're probably using a controller that only has 2 with like a swap button? Insane. You can't like you'd spend all your time just like nudging and you wouldn't be able to do anything else. So like, in a situation where you're trying to lock together more than one, like maybe 2-3 tracks, and you've got these ideas together and you want to be focusing on what the movement from those is to the next thing, having sync there, like you said, it means you don't have to do those like 15 extra steps that like, oh, I see what the BPM is on the screen, so I switch the slider and I nudge it. It's like, well, okay, you followed the instructions, but you're an algorithm. You're doing the same thing every time. You are an algorithm, so it's like, okay, just use it. That's my opinion.
I like that take on it.
That's not to say
good.
that there isn't a beauty to it. And I loved at the Labor Day event, before I did my set, Ubo 42 did that techno vinyl set. It's like it was so cool watching him do what he was doing. But there just seemed to be this beauty about the idea of mixing vinyl. But I don't know if that was just me because I'm a DJ, or if that's something that like everybody on the dance floor would fully appreciate. I'm hoping others might, because I just bought 2 records today at Recordland and fully intend on getting some turntables and spinning some vinyl myself. But that's a I need more money issue.
Yeah, right, for sure. Let's talk a little bit about forward-thinking gear manufacturers as well, because this kind of all really ties into just everything essentially. Like, all these gear manufacturers are trying to do different things and move forward, and it's interesting how some take ideas from others, some try to go against ideas of others. Like in the case of Denon, and we were talking about how compatibility between Rekordbox, and Serato and Tractor as well. Denon plays friendly with everybody. It'll read Serato cue points. It'll play friendly with Rekordbox, and you plug your USB in. It's like, boom, do you want to load your Rekordbox library? If you already have stuff prepared to do club shows on club standard gear, then you don't really need to think too much about it. You just plug into the Denon and you're good to go. I don't see other manufacturers doing that kind of stuff, which is kind of strange if you ask me, But Denon's also, and this isn't just a plug for Denon. I mean, everybody that knows us knows we love our Denon here, but they're really trying to branch out and do different stuff. One thing I seen the other day that I find really super cool, I don't use virtual DJ. I haven't since, the early days, 2009, 2010, before I ever actually touched a DJ controller myself. But apparently with this piece of gear, the Prime 4, you can set it up with Virtual DJ to do your VJing as well as DJing all on the screen at the same time. So it'll show you, each, and I was mentioning Serato video earlier. It doesn't work. This seems like it works. It shows you each side of your video and then your mix in the middle. And I guess through Virtual DJ, you have a bunch of other effects and stuff you can edit, but it's done on the controller.
Were you guys fiddling around with that at the, the last McLean Creek party this summer?
No, actually. So that's shout out to Drugs Crew. Shout out to Amy and B there. He brought this big projector that he got from a church, I guess, or something that shut down. So he just started projecting, and now we're kind of talking about how can we make this possibly so artists can kind of pick from a book, what kind of style do you want behind you while DJing type of thing. So we're kind of moving into that, but it was kind of a surprise. I wasn't expecting it. We didn't plan it. It just worked out, and it's turned out pretty cool there as well.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool way to go with DJ equipment, because all of a sudden you don't need to be renting like lighting controllers and all this other stuff. It can all be like tied in together. And I think like as an artist that likes to create a complete experience, that's a lot of capability all wrapped up into one little unit, and you don't need to have some other guy trying to do it. You don't need to have all sorts of extra gear. You just need the lights, and like I'm assuming that there's some kind of little interface box or something that you need to make sure that anything plugs into it. I don't know.
You'd be surprised actually. And to touch on that too, like we're not just throwing parties, right? We're creating a vibe. We're curating a vibe is the way I like to say it. So with this for the Prime 4, it actually does the lighting for us as well. So our stage shows are done through a computer program similar to how you would run stems through a computer program, which we're going to get into right here in a minute. But you run it through a computer program first. You can set up your light shows, and then the decks do all of the light synthesis based on music. So anyone that comes up and plugs a USB in, it'll run off of the banks that we have set and do essentially curated light shows as well. And it's just super forward thinking and super cool to me. And another big thing, which is the stems we've been, as you said, foreshadowing the whole time, is Denon is actually going to be the industry first, as far as I understand, standalone stems coming on December 11th. The Prime 4 Plus already has the beta out or whatever. They've been talking about this for a while. The Prime 4 has been out for 3 or 4 years, or Prime 4 Plus, I should say. The Prime 4 has been out for about 5 years now. And they promised when people bought the Prime 4 Plus that there was going to be stems, but they haven't been implemented until now. I did hear some people got the demo a little while back, but it wasn't widespread. But it's officially launching on all of the InMusic brands gear, which is Newmark, Denon, Akai. I think there's a couple other ones, whatever. So whoever is going to have access to that stuff. So the way that works is you essentially put it through the Engine DJ software. And again, this goes back to DJs doing their homework. And you run your playlist or whatever you want. You can drag and drop simply, or you can select tunes you want individually or as a whole, and then just right click and say analyze stems. And it's going to analyze all your stems, and it's going to give you a breakdown just similar to Serato would on how, you get your lead, you get your vocals, you get your drums, and you get your bass. Originally, Denon was saying that they were only going to have a 2-panel stems, and I believe it was vocals and bass that you were going to be able to mess with, and that was supposed to be onboard stem analyzation. But because it's just a little bit out of reach at this point, I guess, they're doing the stem analyzation in the program ahead of time, which I think is just fine anyways. It just goes onto your, library, whether it's Rekordbox or, in this case, Engine, whatever, Serato. So every USB you carry around is just going to have it there once you pre-prepare that stuff. But Serato has a decent set of stems, as we'll get into here a little bit. I've played with it a bunch. I find it does really load up the computer. I have a pretty decent computer that I bring with me, laptop, and it has some issues sometimes, even with pre-analyzing in Serato. So I've kind of moved away from Serato and more to the standalone. So I'm super excited about this. But also, I really want to get into Unknown Artist is a proponent of Native Instruments Tractor, which I don't have a lot of experience with, but I have heard that Tractor has the best stem separation on the market, which is super exciting and super cool. And basically, let us know a little bit about this, because it's quite interesting.
Before I started seriously using the Tractor stem options, because like Tractor's been doing stems since 2014. They were one of the first companies to start talking about it, as far as I'm, and also implementing it. Although at the time they didn't include like an in-house separator, so it's like you really had to like do 3 extra layers of, okay, I gotta find the song, then I gotta go put it through the program, and then I gotta separate it, and then I gotta recombine it in another program into a stem file. And there's just like so much work at a time that it deterred me at the time. And then about a year ago, a number of my friends that use Serato said, "Oh, you got to try out the stem stuff," right? So I went over to my friend's place and I started fiddling around with it a little bit, and it sounded pretty good. Like, like you said, it separates it into the individual components of the song, depending on how you have it
In
set
real
on.
time, which is pretty
Yeah,
cool about the
and the
Serato
real time,
thing.
yeah. By the way, this is your public service announcement to turn off Microsoft Teams. That's bloatware. So it can overload the computer once you're if you're trying to do stems on 2-3 decks. It can be a pretty heavy load on the computer, and that was something that we experienced as we were fiddling with it. And then, like, I like to say, okay, well, if it can do this, okay, perfect, I'm going to try it on everything, right? And then didn't sound good and crashed the computer a bunch of times, and only once on stage, but that was fine. And I started playing around with it.
Only
And
takes once.
just once. I started playing around with it, and it's such a powerful idea, because being able to separate the parts out instead of just hoping that whatever producer produced the track kept all of his bass stuff in the frequency that the like low frequency knob affects, like that's like a high level of production, and requires somebody that has a lot of forethought to say, okay, I'm going to make this song for DJs. And not everybody thinks that way, right? So like having the ability to separate stuff out like that is like really powerful, and it allows for incredible multi-genre like sets, because you've got two tracks that are running at about the same BPM, but like they've got totally different drum patterns. You can be like, oh, we're listening to house right now, and then, oh, now it's garage, now there's a shuffle to it. You can like really jump through genres so fluidly. You can bring ideas that you wouldn't have been able to bring into those genres in easily, because, well, they're already quantized. They went through the software. They already, the Ableton production or whatever program you're using already did all of the work to make sure that everything is locked in the ways that it should be. And then, any little overlaps or weird parts or areas where you as a DJ are responsible to do something, right? So, with the early Serato stuff, it sounded pretty good. It was really easy to get. But one thing that I've noticed with any of the stem separators is, like, you got to be really careful with artifacts. The AI doesn't get it right every time.
Yeah.
So I feel that, like, one of the things that worries me about the like immediate like stem separation on the fly kind of thing. One thing that always worries me is, like, okay, what if I'm running too much? The AI doesn't get to put as much into it as it wants to, and then for some reason, like, all of the background of like background noise for the atmosphere is part of the drum track. So if you take the drum track out, there's nothing in the background except for instruments.
I find vocoder instruments get mistaken for leads.
Yeah, exactly.
A
So
lot as well.
there is a lot of potential for hiccups along the way, and do your homework and you do it ahead of time, then you have that opportunity to know before you get there, like, this just isn't a good song for this.
Yeah.
This isn't going to work, because no matter how hard the AI tries, there's just too many frequencies all in the same area, and it might get most of it, but it's not going to get all of it. And if it does get all of it, there's almost like a hole that you can hear, expect something to be there, but it doesn't exist. If the other track that you're using to like mix with doesn't have something that fills that space, then people who know what they're listening to know what it is, and people who don't know what's going on. If you lose the flow and you lose people's immersion, then you're just playing songs. And it stops being like a really fun experience and starts being like, okay, what am I waiting for? Like, so there's like a lot of pitfalls and a lot of pre-work that you can kinds of things, but that's something that's playing against it right now. So there's some work to do with that. And recently, I was talking about, I did a performance with my lo-fi jazz project a little while ago, and since we played all the instruments, we had the Ableton files, we generated our own stems. And one of the things that held us back in that moment was just the fact that the PC codecs and the Apple codecs wouldn't talk to each other. And the PC native version of the Tractor stem creator hasn't been updated since 2015, and only outputs at 256 kilobytes per second on any given track, which is not even MP3 quality. And if you're a DJ that wants to play on larger speaker systems, that's not an option. That's going to sound terrible. Those speakers are going to rip your music to pieces. So there's still a long way to go. But I've and I'm going to go on a little tangent here once again, talking about, like, what is a DJ? So, like, a lot of people want to compare DJing to instrumental. They want to say, oh, you're just pushing buttons, adjusting knobs. You're not a real instrumental, not a real musician.
definitely something that
You know,
I used to think before I got into the electronic music
yeah.
scene and realized what it was.
So,
Absolutely.
people are always trying to compare DJs to somebody that's in a band, but there's like a really, really close comparison to what a DJ does and what a DJ that doesn't play instruments at all, but is definitely a part of the band. And if you go back to, if you're looking at like concerts, like, symphonies, at like older big band jazz groups, there's a guy at the front facing the instrumentalist. He controls how fast it goes with his motions on his, controls when the parts come in, controls how they come in, how loud they are, controls all of this stuff which goes into composition and
That's
the way
such
that
a
it's
cool
all together.
perspective.
So like what we're talking about is the director of a band, right? So, when you're looking at stems is moving a DJ out of playing music and like occupying this gray space of like, okay, what is a DJ, into like a composer slash band director element where all of a sudden you can control every part of your music. You want it to come in a little later, you want it to come in like even just maybe it's a repeat pattern, you want offset in the beat. You have the capability to pull that sound out of that track, adjust it, add effects specifically to what you want, and then integrate. So, I really feel that these like stems are really creating a moment where DJs can become more than, and I'm not saying everybody's like this because like obviously scratch DJs are just like sampling and they're
A
in it
whole
and they're
nother world, right?
exactly,
Yeah.
it's a whole other world. So, that doesn't really count. But, we're in this place where DJs can stop feeling like, okay, I'm just going to play the music. I hope the crowd likes it. And they can start to really like create an experience that is unique and is complex and is like, it's so funny because like recently Tractor upgraded to Tractor 4 and they added the in-house stem separation, which is something I'd been waiting for years. So I was on the website like reading about it, and you get to the stems part, and like the paragraph reads as, wow, DJs, no more standing around on stage waving your arms and asking the crowd how they're feeling. Now you can actually do something. And it's on the Tractor website where they're literally
Hilarious.
calling out DJs who just play the beat and they're, waving their hands around.
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah,
attacked.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, they just straight called out on the company website. It's so funny. I recommend you look it up. Anyway, that's my tangent.
Well, that's where I want to kind of explore a little bit more with DJ Studio. I only got the trial, so it's expired now, but do the monthly on it is they seem to have a pretty decent stems engine in it, and I honestly didn't put too much thought into it. I thought it was like, oh, you're using this software to kind of make like a pre-mix set, which it's actually a very powerful piece of software to do that.
Is it similar to Serato where you do live performances with it as well? You can mix with it like virtual DJ sort of thing?
I don't think it's something you use for live.
It's only pre-preparation. Okay.
Yeah, and so it was literally today. It's just a video on my recommended feed. It's like, oh yeah, 5 useful tools in this software or whatever. I'm like, I wonder if they're talking about DJ Studio. So I go, and sure enough, they're talking about DJ Studio, and they were showing some really, really cool stuff in there. And one of it was like, okay, they're doing this transition from this house track into this D&B track, but they wanted to kind of keep the vocals in. And they were able to pull the vocals out, and then as it was going through the transition, it was speeding up the BPMs, but they're they were pointing out like a notable vocal clash. So it's like, okay, because there's a vocal clash, where they've got the vocal from the one track kind of isolated, they were able to say, okay, within that vocal, say mute the vocals on this other track, and so they, it was able to do that. It was able to, you'd see the waveform of what's being muted, and then okay, the vocals on this house track would now on the drop continue through on top of the DMB track, but once the vocals were gone, it would bring back the vocals from the D track, and it was like all just right there. And it's like, well, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's like fully automated. You set up like your sequences. Whatever.
Yeah, so
That's
it's
really cool.
Yeah, so it's really easy to work with, and then it can export. And I'd like to understand this more, because like while you can export the premix, it can also export like some of the individual elements that you would use into a record box playlist as well. So then you can have all your stuff pre-ready to go for when you're going to start actually performing live. So yeah, no, I definitely want to look into that a bit more, because the whole point that I originally wanted to get it was just to, okay, here's this track from, you know, that rave track from the movie Blade that everybody knows, and I really wanted the lead out of it, so let's throw that in there and separate all the stems. And it did a really good job at separating all the stems, and so I was able to take like the lead element, throw it into an Ableton project, and start kind of working with that. And so that's where I initially worked with it. I wanted to find, okay, what software's out there that will allow me to do stem separation with tracks, so I can actually start doing my own bootlegs or whatever. Um, but it seems like there's a lot more neat stuff going about it for being able to actually do a lot of preparation, with some of the more complex mixing styles within that software that is certainly worth exploring.
There's also a website that I've used a couple of times, which is like it's a really interesting setup. It's called La La Lol.
I was about to say that.
Yeah. And
What
it's
is it, sorry?
it's called
LaLala.ai, I think.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
it's called
Okay,
La La Lol.
okay.
LaLala.ai, I think.
So
Yeah.
what it is it's like a virtual access network almost, where you drop the track that you want, you select what you want separated, but then you have to wait for somebody's very powerful computer somewhere to do the work for you,
I see.
and then
Okay.
it sends it back to you. You got to wait in a queue for it. But I've actually found that stem separator is fantastic. Like comparable, like maybe this is, I haven't used it, or maybe I'm wrong with Serato. I'm sure there's been upgrades, but I like the first time I heard the
Serato's
Serato
okay.
step or the separator, I said to myself, "La La La is way better."
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well,
I'll
because
definitely check that out.
because Serato, you're still limited to 4, whereas like La La La, and I'm pretty sure DJ Studio. It's been a few
Yeah,
months
you
since
can
I
have
did it.
every instrument
Yeah,
separated.
I think you'll have a lot more,
Yeah.
a lot more options for separation. So a lot smarter. But yeah,
I
definitely
find
a neat tool.
stems are kind of one of the most exciting thing for me currently because again, it's coming out in Denon soon and stuff, for standalone, but it just allows you so much freedom. And then like being in both the position of a DJ and an enjoyer of the music on the dance floor, you can not only create and surprise yourself, but be on the dance floor and hear some remixes that they'll never exist again. You know what I mean? You get this unique experience that's just like, wow, what did I just hear? And you can kind of really start to add a flair in a lot of ways regarding that. Super neat. You kind of mentioned codecs earlier too. I want to talk a little bit about that as well because a lot of people say, you have to have lossless to have the best quality or whatever, whether that's Wave or AIFF. Some gear doesn't play AIFF a lot of times, right? Most gear will play MP3 or Waves without issues. But I personally, and I've heard when they did the Alberta Electronic Music Conference several years ago, I was a photographer for that as well. They had I think it was like a $500,000 or $600,000 sound system, with these special speakers that were designed in such a way and whatever. And this record player was like $10,000 itself and whatever else. They were playing lossless files, and they would let you, whoever was there play their own files as long as they were lossless or whatever. And I really can't justify a difference between lossless and MP3 320, on a sound rig. Now, maybe it's because that rig wasn't playing MP3 320s right next side by side type of thing. But like our sound rig, Pirate sound rig is pretty clear and it's quite, defined. I don't hear a difference personally between lossless or MP3 320. Do you guys really notice?
I do, but it's such a weird thing. So, and maybe I've just convinced myself of this. I don't know, but here's how here's like the way that I feel when I'm listening to the differences is that if you're listening to a lossless file and the mastering is done properly, right? Because like you can have a lossless file that's terribly mastered and doesn't sound good anymore. The transfer rate only represents an opportunity. So when I'm listening to lossless files and I'm in, like, let's say I'm at Shambhala at the Village, it doesn't sound like the music is coming from in front of me. It feels like I'm inside of the song. But I feel like a lot of the times when I've listened to MP3 files, it sounds like the MP3 file is coming from the speaker. There's a direct. Like I said, maybe that's just like a weird thing that I've come up with on my own and I've tricked myself into believing it, but that's the difference that I feel with.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like I one of those guys that kind of bought into the whole vinyl Kool-Aid sort of thing about, vinyl's like so much greater. It's like it's not, like your lossless is great. 320 kilobit MP3. I mean, I'd be curious about your experience on it, because from like when I go to like the hi-fi forums and stuff like that, like people don't really hear much of a difference on it. I think the trick though is when you're dealing with stuff when it comes to like audio production, when you're having to do like audio manipulations, it's like MP3, you're still losing data to create that. Like there's no getting around that aspect of what an MP or whatever M4A file that you're using, that is a lossy format, is have to get rid of something to create it. It's just is what you're getting rid of perceptible by people. But the fact is you are getting rid of something. Is so now if you're trying to do any manipulations and stuff on it and then bring it back to it, so it's like even with um like I'll run all my music through like Platinum Notes, mixing whatever. If I go through Platinum Notes, just in case, I tell it to output as AIF, even if the input was MP3, because my issue is if it's gonna gain stage the file, it's gonna have to take that MP3, even if it's 320, decode it to be effectively lossless to run its algorithm on it, and then re-encode it back into it. Now you're getting rid of more data to do that. So I have to be cognizant of that particular process. Is anytime you're having uh, any modifications or edits done to an MP3 file and then bringing it back into an MP3, you're going to lose doing it that way. Whereas if you're working with that lossless file to begin with, that's not going to be an issue. Whatever you're losing is whatever you're not the actual encoding. But if you're starting with the MP3 that's in 16 or 24 bit, 320 kilobit, that's straight off the master, I don't have too much of an issue with it. I haven't really personally heard much of a difference. I know most hi-fi people, they won't hear a difference unless you tell them which one it is.
Yeah, for sure. And that comes down to like, the people in the dance floor, same with the sync button, they don't fucking know what's going on. You know what I mean? They're there for the music, for the experience, right? It's only the few people around that may notice. And again, being an audiophile or whatever, there might be one or two people there that, oh yeah, that's a MP3 320. But again,
Most people are just saying, "Oh, I love this remix of Akon."
exactly right.
Or whatever it's gonna be.
Yeah, but I accept the fact that my USB will eventually fill up faster than it would have if I had stuck with MP3s, and I accept that because storage is cheap these days.
Oh,
Right?
yeah,
For
like
sure.
with my lossless sets, I get like 2 sets per USB. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm gonna do a new project. All right, pull the other one off, throw it in a folder that I'm pretending I'm gonna go back to, and then start over again.
I know I've got like 500 tracks on my USB, and it's a 128 gig USB.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Crazy, right?
And I think I'm only using 30 some gigs of it. It's got lots of room, more room than I probably need for most of the stuff I'm doing, anyways.
Yeah.
Let's move on and talk a little bit about some artist development. In your personal lives and your artist lives, what upcoming projects, collaborations, ideas, or ambitions do you have up your sleeve for the near term?
Over the next probably 6 months to a year, I'm starting a project where I want to create hip hop and instrumental originals, to then remix myself into every genre. So, this is something that I was talking about earlier where, like I said, okay, like stems can be really powerful for this because, you know, you come up with your own palette, so to speak. You can program that all into the Tractor Remix decks where you've got all your different drum patterns, all your different bass patterns, risers, all of it. So it's all available on a beat pad, essentially. And not only that, you can sample any loop from any of the regular decks out into the remix. So, my idea is that by creating my originals, I get my own content, but then I can also recolor it with whichever genre. So my next 12 months are probably going to be focused on creating my own material, and then also building it out so that it can be accessible at any kind of venue. any kind of event. Doesn't matter, like, okay, this is the vibe I want. Perfect. I've got my originals. I've got all of my stems ready. I can even bring an instrument if I want to do some of the parts live instead of just playing the recordings of them. Then, take out the sax part because I'm going to play it. Use the stem control stuff. So my goal is to really build out my own library, then really start to hammer out as close to a consistent sound as I can. Without wanting, without trying to pigeonhole myself or trying to just do. That's my goal.
The long-term goal would be to travel the world on somebody else's dime because they want me to go spin music out in Japan or something. But yeah,
shout out to Buck Nick K2.
Yeah.
He just went to
Right?
Japan. I don't know. I don't know if it was on somebody else's dime
I
necessarily.
was on Ava Deep.
Making waves out there for sure. That's pretty cool.
They took over the O2 nightclub out in Tokyo there with Ava Records, and had a blast out there. He's got some interesting stories. You should have him on and talk about some of the shit out in Shinjuku that they got into, and
absolutely
money lost and all that fun stuff.
Oh, really? Okay, crazy.
Yeah, it sounds like some fun stories there. But I mean, that's the long term. But even then, near term, of course, I want to, in order to do that, I want to continue to build Pinpoint as a brand. But even then, there's other areas. Like I've started using, Precision Radio is the name of my radio shows, and I kind of like the Precision for something I'm contemplating for this upcoming New Year's Eve shows, possibly incorporating as Precision Entertainment Inc. and kind of making that my shell company for managing brand, or if I want to do live events, that becomes it, or I can have a record label under that brand or something. I would like to at least get a few tracks finished so I can actually release it and maybe actually press some vinyl, figure out what it looks like for being able to distribute vinyl places as well, and kind of think about things from a business that side of things, how to grow myself that way, because I think for me, my goals there is what kind of drives a lot of what I'm trying to do as an artist and performer as well. It's why I've decided, I'm just going to start DJing now, because that's going to give me opportunity to start getting in front of people more than just sitting back and trying to chuck more money at gear and whatever else that's largely sitting in the studio. It's not to say I can't do something there, but most of the stuff that I've been able to do that I've made money with it has nothing to do with techno or dancing, and everything to do with meditation and stuff like that. Not that I have an issue with it. I love that aspect of things, and I actually thought it was fascinating at the Sync Sound and Image conference. Is one of the artists we brought out basically has a residency at a yoga studio. Essentially, and some of the gear or some of the modules that he was using, it's like, I need that module. Is it called Endless Processor? If you're ever looking into Eurorack, it's a really cool module.
Right.
I really want it. And then another one that's this beautiful granular processor called Cornflakes. Problem is, Endless Processor is like $400, and Cornflakes is $600. And don't get into modular unless you hate money. Moral of the story there. But anyway, so yeah, no, that's kind of like the high level, because even within that, like, I'm still kind of discovering a lot of things about my natural inclinations as an artist as well. I'd love to try and get doing more like soundtracks style stuff as well, and soundscapes, and kind of getting a little more in depth with orchestral type music, and kind of leaning more on Hans Zimmer's inspiration, because I certainly have a huge respect for him and his history, and starting as an electronic as well. And fun fact with him, if anybody's ever watched the music video, Video Killed the Radio Star.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, who's on the synthesizer in the background? Mr. Zimmer. But yeah, no, there's a lot of cool shit that I want to do, and I'm still exploring a lot of it, and I know I want to kind of expand things a bit. Well, maybe expand's not the best word, but at least start honing in on some ideas from a business perspective, as to how I want to try and pursue things, but still allow myself room for exploration. But I definitely want to get a few of those unfinished projects.
So I guess in my case, and it kind of ties in, 'cause you're touching on orchestral. For the next little while here, I've actually just dropped. I think it was last Friday, the 29th, I believe, was the date. I dropped Skull and Bass as a single on Nebula Records. So it's kind of getting into this new subgenre of drum and bass. I call it deep dark pirate jump up. So it's got some elements of jump up. It's got deep dark drum and bass, and it's got the whole pirate theme to it. If you've been to any of our shows over the summer, you've definitely heard some of it. I've been playing it out a lot on our sets and our live streams and stuff. It's super exciting and it's super cool just to be able to develop something different. Like, I kind of feel like I finally found my lane essentially. So I'm going to be working to flesh out and release that album in hopefully the next few months. Takes time, and again with the creative blocks we're talking about and ways to find new things to essentially create. You don't want to create the same thing twice, but you kind of want to stay within that bubble. Yeah, aesthetic. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, for sure. So definitely going to be working on that myself. As far as ideas, pirates always, we have a bunch of stuff we're going to be doing. We're going to be talking about. We are doing a crowdfunding thing, as I kind of mentioned before. So we're crowdfunding our next show. We're trying something a little bit different. It's really not about the money or anything. We're just trying to keep the ship afloat and keep the parties happening. We were doing free parties all through the summer, and it did cost a lot of money, obviously. That's why we're crowdfunding this next party. So once we reach our next goal, we're going to do a party. We're going to release the date. We're going to release the location, and we're going to do it that way. And I haven't really seen people doing that before. Maybe people have, but I think it's kind of a cool idea, something different. And it's really community based. We're all grassroots. So that's kind of what we're looking forward to next. We're also actually looking forward to a New Year's party here, which we're going to be setting up. Don't have a lot of details to release quite yet, but it's going to be outside of Calgary, and it's going to be pretty banging. It sounds like it's going to be multiple stages, and we're going to have pirate sound rig set up. So we're pretty excited for that. As artists, where do you guys see yourselves in the coming 5 to 10 years? Have any major long-term goals that you are working to?
And
I mean, I think like Chris was saying, it'd be lovely to do a tour. Be a lot of fun. I think unknown artists just want to proliferate, get my figures in as many pots as I can. Be there all the time in the background, in your metadata or not. Who knows?
In the metadata, in the photos, you're there.
Exactly.
Get on that AI train.
yeah, I'd say Japan. I'm not saying that facetiously. Kind of driving a bit of why I would love to kind of tour more. I've fallen in love with the I first went there back in 2007. I've been times. Would love to be able to actually tour and the opportunity doing this to travel the world, see areas of people and stuff. But I've had a particular interest. I've been looking at some of the cheap Japanese homes in rural Japan, and maybe if the whole electronic music thing isn't the direction I go in the long term, I've contemplated the idea of having a sort of a wellness tourism retreat out in rural Japan, where a large part of it is sound based as well.
Sound healing or whatever. Yeah, that's cool.
exactly. I really did enjoy doing a lot of that sound healing work, working with gals that are very heavily into that, and getting to know them, and even the community is kind of like opened my eyes to not to like just the different facets of sound healing, and how spirituality kind of plays into a lot of that as well, and being kind of a big proponent of mental health. I know the rave culture is huge on that, and raving has saved many people's lives.
It has, absolutely.
Just being part of the community, and I think that that part of it really attracts me into that, and I think kind of leaning into sound for mental health aspect is where I don't know if doing what I'm doing today is going to be where I'll be at 5 to 10 years down the road, it could very much be getting more embedded into, healing and stuff through meditative therapies, and because it is a cool area. It's an area that I felt very drawn to. But I also really love what I'm doing right now as well. So we'll kind of see where that winds up.
Feeling that it's really hard to kind of predict, things change so fast. Sometimes 3 months seems like, oh wow, that 3 months went by so fast. But other times you're like, wow, that 3 months I learned so much. It felt like 5 years. So personally, myself, I hope to be, continuing the music production, obviously with forward thinking, kind of different stuff. I always try to be different, try to change stuff up. I do play a lot of drum and bass, but the other night the set that I played was a bunch of UK grime, half of the set,
Nice.
and then a bunch of UK drum and bass, spitting lyrics over it and stuff,
Yep.
Brucey, that kind of stuff. That was pretty fun, a little bit different than what I usually do. I'm into dubstep too. I'm into metal. I'm into all this other kind of stuff. I'd really like to see kind of all the projects that I'm composing and working towards take off, in my personal career. As far as like, it's quite difficult to manage a lot of, you mentioned having fingers in so many pies. It's quite difficult to manage a lot of this all at once, but at the same time, it's quite fun and it's quite good for the ADHD brain. You know what I mean? You get bored so easily with certain things. You kind of just move on. It's nice to have another lane there to just be like, oh yeah, you know what? I'm not feeling this right now. Just go over here and then take a little bit of that influence from what you were just doing and bring it to something completely different and kind of just play around. So I kind of just want to keep expanding myself and just kind of see where it goes, like you guys are saying as well, just never giving up. And I mentioned this in a lot of podcasts and streams as well, but just keep at it and be excited for the future,
Oh, totally.
Yeah, there's a special kind of drive that carries you all the way to the.
So what you struggle with the most, do you feel, when trying to promote or advance your career, and what do you think would be a solution in that case?
Time management. That's pretty much what time management.
Management, yeah.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
Yeah, no, that for me, that's that really is it. By the time I have time available to try to put myself into the headspace of production or try, there's no getting around the fact that it's still work. Even though it's fun, it's still work, and you can only spend so much time working before you start dancing on that burnout fence post. And at a certain point, you're going to go over the edge, and then you're going to have no productivity. That's kind of where I'm at right now. Is like running out of productivity where I can sit in front of my computer and listen to music and start having my head hurt. Try to listen to music where I just need to lay down and so being able to manage the time so that when you are in the space of being able to be creative so that you can actually try and do that and move other things aside that don't serve that goal, I think is what I do need to start getting better at.
It's a good one for sure.
I think one of my roadblocks is finding people who want to collaborate and work consistently. I've got some weird ideas. I think we've heard many of them, but in my mind, music has always and should always be a communal experience. Coming from the world of jazz, it's not uncommon for you to be playing and somebody comes up and says, "Hey, I got an instrument," and then they get into it with you. This openness to collaboration that really drives, in my mind, the beauty of music.
See a lot of jazz buskers, for example, where people will just roll up and there's a piano there, someone's already playing saxophone, and they'll hop on the piano
and they just start
you know,
joining in, right?
awesome.
So,
Yeah.
like for me, I hate making it on my own. Boring. I don't like it. I can't say engaged. It's not a fun experience. I can sit there and hammer out a track on my own if I want to, but I'm not going to have the same kind of experience that I would have from working with somebody who's going to throw their ideas in, like change it up on me, like, and add different flavors to what I've already got going on. So for me, I think it's just finding people who want to collaborate, and then the more important part, because everybody wants to be part of the magic, but the most important thing is consistent people who want to work on things consistently, correctly, with a purpose. That's something that I'm struggling.
That's kind of in line with where I was going to go with this myself as well. Like, I've done collabs before in the past. I've released several songs on collaboration with people as well. It's hard. And even sometimes I find myself being the person that, it's like, oh shit, everything got too tied up and, oh, we were supposed to collab, whatever. I do also agree with you on that big time. It's really hard to get consistent people who want to just sit there and do the thing. A couple of weeks ago, I just released it. I think it actually came out just yesterday, I believe, on Spotify and stuff. I was up late one night talking to this guy that I've been working with, and he's actually the guy that signed me to Nebula Records. We've started to become friends, and he's like, I've got all these ideas, and I'm like, I've got all these ideas, and he lives in BC, right? So we're just kind of shooting the shit essentially, and it just culminated to boom. He had this track that was mostly ready but needed something, and he sent it to me, and I threw down some ideas, and boom, we created this collaboration. And we were up to like 5 or 6 in the morning the one night. We were just feeding off each other, creating this, and it was super fun. And we've been talking closely and still working together and stuff, and we're going to continue to do that. But I've worked with several people who write lyrics, and they're quite talented at writing lyrics. I've been friends with them for a long time, for example, but they're really inconsistent about actually getting the lyrics down. I'm not really the strongest lyric writer, don't get me wrong. I dabble, I play around, but people who are often busy, tied up with this and that, but they're so creative, they're always writing lyrics. They have books and books and books of lyrics. I'm like, man, can we get together? Like, I got beats,
pick any paragraph, start on bar 16.
Pretty much. Let's just go. Like, I find it lyricists are really, really hard to get to work with, whether it's hip hop or whatever else, right? That's just my personal experience in that realm.
I'm just starting to wade into finding lyricists for my stuff. I've met some people in all sorts of weird places who are still like, oh, we're doing lyricism, right? And it's like there's playing a bit of Overwatch recently. There's these full chat rooms of people where one guy plays a beat, or like you have to go and find it on YouTube, and everybody goes through and drops bars on it. Right. And I found some really talented people on there, and I'm like, hey man, I've got all these, I've got some Ableton files, there's space for lyrics. And I send you the file, and they're like, oh, no, not interested in it. But you just have too many people say this to you before. Like, what's the vibe? Let's just make it, and it's done. Right? And then you can do something else. Like,
not only that, once and I should have realized it because I've released music on my own before as well. And you go through all the process of how you split the royalties or whatever else. But after, because he's part of Nebula Records as well, he was like, yeah, well, I'll split the royalties with you. And then it hit me, and I'm like, oh shit, collabs are a way to make some fucking money in the music industry without having to do all the legwork on your own. And again, you had mentioned bouncing ideas off each other. Like, okay, great. Like I have this idea, whatever, maybe I'm not super strong in writing leads, for example, in my case. He's better at writing leads, but I'm a better overall composer. So, it's like, well, great, I can write this lead. Or in the case of another one of our friends, viewers who are going to be, or I'm going to be doing some collaboration with as well. He's better on the sound design side of things. Don't get me wrong. Again, I do some sound design myself, but he does more of that, but he doesn't have the composing side of things, right? And I look at myself.
To bring all your strengths.
Yeah, exactly. And again, just the ideas, people different takes on things, or, oh, this sound to me sounds like this, but to them it sounds, like this, it doesn't fit, or whatever else. It's just nice to have that feedback, like right there when you're doing stuff. So I find that definitely super cool.
The other fun thing to kind of do every once in a while, and this I guess plays a bit into the hardware side of things, whether it's an actual instrument or synthesizer or something. So Oscillate every month will do the event called Beat Convergence. We'll essentially gather out at Anthony's garage there, just in Ramsey, and it's super fascinating because I've been in both types of jam situations where it's like I brought a synthesizer out to the Legion, and everybody's got either guitar, drums, bass, vocals, whatever, and they're all playing music that everybody knows stuff. But when we go to Beat Convergence, or we get a bunch of us Oscillate folks together to jam, it's like, okay, what key are we gonna play? Okay, we're gonna start. We'll do something in C. Cool. And then I might start playing something on my synthesizer, and then everybody starts kind of coming up with stuff to join in with, and then like it just becomes this cool creative jam session where literally we could have just take any 5-minute snippet of what we just did and release that as a track right then and there. So,
That's kind of the magic of when you're working with other artists, bands, DJs, whatever, live production, you know, analog synths, whatever have you. You come together and you kind of get in this vibe, this energy where the music almost takes on a life of its own. You know, it's quite fascinating, and you feel it, and you're like, shit, we should have been recording that. You try to remember it's not always the same, but it's always good to have like a recording going or something when you're jamming like that. You know,
Yeah, no,
Just in
super
case.
fun.
yeah, just in case. For
At
sure.
least we did record the last one. I haven't listened to it. I think that's still. I'm not sure. I'll have to double check to see if he dropped the recording into our Discord or not.
A lot of people say you should record everything you do. You should record all your sets. You should save all of your project files, even if you think it's nothing, because it could be something one day or whatever. You know, it's an interesting take there for sure.
I actually kind of agree with that one.
Tell us more.
So mainly because it's like when I'm in a different mental place if that record gets hit. Yeah, so it's like if I'm just having fun and jamming, it's like I don't mind if that is forgotten, because that moment was what was actually what mattered at that time. And like if I hit the record button, that kind of changed the mentality of it. Now
It
you're
does,
thinking that I have
100%.
to record it. So it's like I rarely record anything unless I'm repeating something over days. So I've got a handful of melodies that I've come up with that like now I find like I might have this chord progression. I'm always playing this chord progression. I have this I'm always playing this melody. I might try it with a different sound, but even if somebody sat me in front of a piano, I might play that chord progression or that melody. It's like, okay, there might be something there. Let's work with this, and then I can build on top of that. But for the most part, it's just exploratory for me.
Do you have a background in music theory?
No, my music theory background started in 2022 when I started going down this path.
Very cool.
I remember
I've got
even with the Impulse Tracker, like I remember listening to songs and trying to come up with my own music, and be like, oh, what the hell is it? I didn't even know the term chord progression, but that's effectively what it was I was hearing, and didn't know why these notes sounded great together because I wasn't even trying to do it because I'm busy programming notes in, and then I'm not the greatest of piano player at that time, really understand that stuff. So it wasn't until like I really started focusing on back in 20 that, oh, that's why. And then one of the tracks that I made, I think it was E minor. I don't know it was E minor. I just knew those notes sounded good together. Yeah.
So I'm gonna make a statement, and I want to hear what you guys think.
Sure.
There's no such thing as performance. There is only private practice, public practice.
I love it. I love it. It's super true, I guess. I mean, really, like, I've been DJing for so long. Like, I've been DJing since 2011, not on stage necessarily, but I started, you know, playing around with gear and stuff, and then, you know, it branches out from there. But you never really fully get over the stage fright, kind of, you know what I mean? Like, even if there's only a few people, even if it's a small bar show, whatever, or, you know, you're at a smaller festival, for example, and the stage is empty, there's still that stage fright. You're getting on stage, it's kind of like, kind of have to get over that hump, if you will. But I find it always goes away after a few tracks. As soon as you get the vibe, you get in there, you start feeling it, goes
And
away.
you forget.
You forget, for sure. But it never, for me anyways, has never really gone away, you know?
For what I think about that statement.
We'll get back to you.
Well, it's probably going to give me food for thought because it's like I disagree. I don't know why though.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear what
Yeah.
you.
But
I mean, they call
but I
it-
can understand why. Like you brought that up because it does make sense. But innately, I feel like I disagree with it.
I agree, but I don't like it.
No,
I mean, they call
no,
it.
I like it. I actually really do like it and think it's a neat perspective. But
Yeah.
but from but the technical side of me is what's disagreeing with you. So I think it's just like I get it. I agree and understand where you're coming from, but I think it might not be quite the best way to approach it because I think there's some finer details at play that really separates performance from practice. But I also think of like the doctor that always calls what he does for work a practice.
I was just
Stuff
going to
like
mention
that.
exactly dental practice or
Yeah,
medical
but
practice.
there's
right?
still
It's
also a
practice.
fundamental difference between that and what we're
course.
doing as well. That kind of comes at
They're
play.
not
It's
performing necessarily. for
yeah,
sure.
it becomes kind of understanding the first principles, I guess, on it. And I think as soon as I can kind of understand more on the first principles, which I haven't really kind of sat back and fully tried to appreciate when it comes to that difference, is where I think I'm coming from I probably am going to disagree with that statement, because I know that there's something underlying that I don't fully understand that I can explain right now.
All right.
And it might take me a moment to think on that one.
No, get back to me. I want to
Yeah.
hear about it.
I mean, nothing is perfect, right? Like it's life. That's the magic of life, right? Everything is unique and different instead of being so perfect and so, the same. So like,
I think intention is probably it.
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good
I
point
think
too.
that is really where I disagree on the intentions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a cool statement for sure. Let's before we wrap this up, let's talk a little bit about any advice you may have for aspiring artists or newcomers to the scene. Kind of talked earlier a little bit about how, finding the underground scene is really difficult for people who are exposed to like more mainstream side of things, the expensive shows, and that kind of ties into how money, people who have money are able to go to these bigger shows where a lot of the underground scene ravers, the original OGs, a lot of people don't have that kind of money. These shows are getting so mainstream that some of them are so expensive. It's kind of hard to justify spending, $100+ a night on a ticket when back in the day the best shows used to be $20 at the door type of thing. But what advice do you guys have for newcomers to the scene or aspiring artists trying to make their footing?
Honestly, probably the best thing to do is just get to know other people that are doing what you want to do. Like I can, I'm pretty sure like every person that you ask is going to have a different piece of advice on how to get started. You know,
Get involved with the community
yeah, just
is
get to know
sort
the
of
community, because like getting started, I went about things expensive. Other people have made gold records on much cheaper and stuff. So there's infinite ways you can go about doing stuff. Get to know people. Want to go cheap? I mean, I'm more than happy to invite people out to my studio or come out to Oscillate Beat Convergence, where a bunch of us are gonna have synthesizers out there. Where it's like, yeah, you want to play? Oh yeah, here, play with my synth. I don't give a. Want to learn how to?
wash your hands. Wash your hands first. Um, my experience getting into DJing, but also having already existed within the community for quite a while before I was pushed in. Well, I wasn't pushed, but what am I gonna do? It's COVID, right? I'm gonna learn how to DJ. So, uh, you know, getting booked as a DJ when you're not involved with the community is really tough, because not only does nobody know who you are, but like you're not bringing anything to the table yet. Someone who wants an opportunity. So a lot of the success that I've had as a DJ and a lot of the best opportunities I've had to DJ have come from getting involved with the people who are organizing the shows first, and then like bringing what you can to the table initially, and then as you involve yourself in the community, you get the opportunity to DJs, and as you that maybe stage watching them and in the back, and everybody knows the best place on the dance floor is behind the DJ. You get the opportunity to like talk to these people, talk to people who are already doing it, get to learn more about how to do it. Maybe you spend a lot of time on your own and you know how to do the technical aspect of it, but the real life, okay, you're on stage, what can happen, right? There's the element of your performance, there's the element of know, maybe the gear doesn't work. Maybe
Yeah,
there's a
issues.
power
Yeah,
outage. Maybe your USB isn't, properly analyzed. Maybe, you got to like really prepare yourself for the fact that you're going to be doing like 70% IT work just to make sure that you can actually spend 30. So getting involved with the organizing the shows and like bringing the support that you can, maybe you're going to help build the stages. Maybe maybe you got a truck, so you can help bring out a generator. Simple things that you support the community, so that when an opportunity arises where somebody doesn't turn up, somebody couldn't make it, maybe they actually really, someone's listening to music and they say, you know what, I want a chance to do this. You're already involved with the community and you're already like a productive member. I don't want to say productive because that's not really a contributing member.
Yeah.
You know, if you're already a contributing member and you're already in it, then you're going to get opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise unless you somehow manage to find yourself a good agent who's willing to work for somebody with no portfolio. So it's get involved with the community, do what you can to help out, and when the opportunity arises, better have your USB on you.
Like we were talking about earlier, always
Yeah.
have a USB ready. And that ties right into what my advice would be to any newcomers is opportunity is first never giving up, because I always mention that, like I said, but don't shut the doors on the opportunities that come across the table. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times, there'll be a party, for example, like house parties. I find are a great opportunity to connect with people because they're so open format. There's no pressure really. It's not like a bigger show, but a lot of the people in the scene, a lot of people involved are going to be at those parties. You know what I mean? So, did it? Oh, it looks like we got a mic,
Mine might be
a
dead
dead
too.
mic. They were supposed to last 6 hours. It's we haven't even gone quite 3, but anyway, that's all right. We're just wrapping it up. Yeah, I do find don't close doors on opportunities. If someone says, "Hey, there's an after party after this rave," you met some friends, and we're going to so and so. Go there, meet the people, because that's when you're going to make a lot of the connections. Sometimes you may not be feeling the best, and I don't want to do this that. Take those opportunities anyways. As best you can. Don't put people, in a position where you're going to get them sick, for example. But definitely take those opportunities and don't miss them.
That's
I think is
one of the challenges I'm finding, especially living in Cochrane, for sure.
Opportunity strikes once in a lifetime, or many times if you're ready for it.
It becomes very costly to be constantly going into the city. But I do what I can. I do what I can.
Looks like the mic actually didn't die, so that's good. We still got input there. Yeah. It looks like good. Anyways, I want to thank my special guests tonight, Pinpoint and Unknown Artist. I want to thank everybody who has sat with us and watched and participated in the comments. It's been a great time, and we're going to be doing more of these. Obviously, we're alternating every second week. So next weekend is going to be the Saturday night D&B Bonanza. We're going to have some special guests there, and we're going to just continue doing what we do, everybody. So a great night, and going to catch y'all in the next one.
Always go to a restaurant called Banana. Growing up. It was, yes. Roll credits.
Again.